Brilliant light streamed through the window. The banquet table was lavishly set. Servants took turns cheering. Congratulations, young Master Isaac, to be nominated for the Royal Academy at only 10 years old. You truly are a genius. Lyra smiled gently. Congratulations, sir. Young Master, since this is such a special day, I have prepared all of your favorite dishes. Isaac happily accepted it all. He smiled and replied, Thank you, Nanny. He was Isaac von Gerda, 10 years old. Hans brought over a large box. Please accept this as well. It is a small gift from me. Isaac was startled and surprised. A gift? I already told you there was no need to be so formal. I insisted on giving it. How could I not? It was thanks to the medicine you provided when my son was sick that he managed to survive. Hans stated firmly, Compared to that kindness, this gift is nothing. Isaac couldn't help but feel moved. Hans. Isaac had no way to refuse. Thank you. I will accept it. Jonas suddenly came running over, excited. Brother. The boy excitedly brought his instrument along. Let me play a song to congratulate. Isaac was extremely surprised. Hans whispered quietly. Young Master Jonas's playing skills are so extraordinary that even the royal court musicians praised him as a prodigy last time. Isaac smiled and replied, Is that so? Then play it for me. Let me hear. Jonas immediately prepared himself. Yes, sir. Small fingers plucked the strings, but the peaceful scene gradually began to fade. Jonas, no. Isaac startled awake in his bed. It took him a moment to regain his composure. Was it just a dream? Isaac muttered to himself. How ridiculous. It seems I dreamt of a distant past. Now, there is no way to return to that time anymore. Familiar footsteps approached. Lucas quickly arrived at the room. He brought breakfast. The sun is up, young Master Isaac. Lucas immediately sensed something was wrong, realizing Isaac wasn't doing well. It seems you just had a nightmare. You look quite pale, he replied wearily, rubbing his aching forehead. I just dreamt of some old memories. Lucas asked casually, From how long ago, sir? He faintly recalled about 20 years ago, setting the breakfast aside. It's been too long. Instead of dwelling on those old, distant memories, Lucas introduced, How about we try some fresh cheese? After we finish eating, we will resume the swordsmanship training we left off yesterday. Lucas quickly left. Enjoy your meal, then. Isaac frowned, deep in thought. About 20 years ago, when I was around 10, that is, 1 month before entering the Royal Academy, I caught a sudden, severe flu. The illness lasted for 3 months. Seeing no signs of improvement, my father, Count von Gerda, had to seek out scholars at the Magic Tower. He received the news. Due to a special physique, the Mage confirmed. As you know, every living creature possesses an innate mana container of its own. Mana circulates at a speed corresponding to the size of that container. However, the mana circulation in your son's body is highly irregular. It is so fast and violent that it is unpredictable. At this rate, the container will shatter completely before long. He could only clutch his head in despair. The truth I had been trying to hide had finally arrived. The mana inside the body erupted violently like an explosion, colliding with the mana from the outside, causing a terrifying mana blast. I had to endure excruciating pain. Many people were killed and injured. When I calmed down, I saw that they had died because of the sudden explosion. Not only those in the mansion, but even my father, von Gerda, could not escape. Isaac made a decision for himself. Lock me away. Tears streamed down Isaac's cheeks. Loneliness consumed him in a place no one could reach. From then on, Isaac stayed in the basement, where no one could be hurt. While eating, he muttered to himself, I was only 15 back then, wasn't I? Suddenly, there was a heavy coughing sound in his ears. Isaac turned around, worried. Hans was coughing, bright red blood visible on his hands. Isaac immediately turned pale. He was coughing up blood. It was one of the symptoms of mana poisoning, because he had been by my side for too long. He instinctively clenched his fingers and hurried forward to support Lucas. Because you stayed with me, even though you didn't have to, you must rest for at least a month. He couldn't help but laugh. If I'm not here, who will serve you? Young master, besides me, you don't really have any other friends, do you? He scolded him. Do you want me to kick you out for being insolent? Lucas was obedient. Don't worry, you know me, don't you? He proudly patted his chest. Even though you've caused dozens of mana explosions, I haven't lost a single hair. You won't find anyone else like me. Isaac stood there, worried. A single mistake could cost him everything. He turned away coldly. Now get lost. I'm going to take my medicine. Don't bother me. Yes, young master. You really are. Lucas respectfully closed the door. It is my honor to serve you. The space changed. Suddenly, Isaac woke up. Congratulations, young Master Isaac. He was dressed in formal attire in the center. Everyone collapsed in pain on the ground. Groans of agony echoed throughout the banquet hall. The space was dead silent and gloomy, truly chaotic. A familiar voice rang out. You finally arrived. Isaac looked back, panicked. Welcome back. Lucas stood alone in the corner of the room, his blood-covered face smiling. Long time no see, young master. He snapped out a nightmare, cold sweat pouring down like a stream. Isaac was lonely in the basement again. Lucas was dead. After coughing up blood and leaving, he didn't return for over a year. It was difficult for me to hear the news of his death from my father. That day, another mana eruption occurred, and I locked my door tightly. I had probably skipped many meals. Isaac was immersed in extreme regret. I should have kept my distance. I shouldn't have been so attached. I should have been colder. Isaac couldn't stop feeling regret. If only I had done that, then everything. A few more years passed, and he didn't bother to eat or drink. Food just sat there, molding and increasing day by day. Yet I was still alive. Therefore, from now on, I must move forward. The young man from back then had become middle-aged, but his appearance was that of an old man. In over 30 years of living underground, I devoted myself entirely to researching magic to overcome this special physique. And now, books had nothing left to teach me. Only intuition and realization remained. Isaac muttered as if self-hypnotizing. You, the one who started the journey, you, the one lonely until the end. Can you stand alone before the infinite, a lonely world where only mana and you yourself exist? Wake yourself up. Many years passed, and I finally found a clue to overcome my physique. The quality of the meals seemed to be declining. Isaac also had some questions. Was there something wrong with the family? I should scrape off the mold before eating. Research documents continued to be sent in, but he sat back at the table, his eyes looking up at the marks on the wall. Isaac was stunned for a moment. Am I already 71 years old? It had been a long time since anyone came here. He cautiously walked closer. He was shocked to hear his brother Jonas calling out. It's me, Jonas. Are you sleeping? Isaac was stunned in disbelief, hurriedly approaching the door. Jonas, why are you here? He was silent for a moment. Jonas spoke tentatively. Can I come in? Isaac hurriedly kept his distance. Just stay there and talk. Have you been doing well lately? Jonas unexpectedly revealed. Do you know? Today is Father's death anniversary. He asked blankly. How did Father pass away? Jonas was cautious. It's a long story. Do you want to hear it? Isaac replied. If you don't mind. Jonas rewound to the past. Then it must start 30 years ago. That was when the war of succession between the first prince and the second prince broke out. The two talked for a long time. It had been so long since he had spoken to anyone else. Isaac couldn't hide the joy in his eyes, feeling as if he had returned to his childhood. He praised him sincerely. I must admit one thing. You tell stories very well. I lost track of time. Jonas laughed heartily. Really? If I had known, I would have wandered the world and lived as a poet. He suddenly mentioned, though with one arm, it probably wouldn't have been easy. Isaac was startled and felt guilty. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Jonas said that everyone loved him very much. What a pity. The last thing I wanted was to see your face. Brother? Isaac was immediately terrified. The last. Jonas continued to explain. While the war was taking place, his breath grew weaker. A portal had opened. Monsters from a strange, unknown world. The extremist faction of the new religion. The crimes they committed. When he opened the door, it was also the moment Jonas collapsed. He was no longer breathing. Isaac couldn't help but feel heartbroken, staring blankly at the sword beside Jonas. Did you really talk for all that time? Isaac decided to take him outside. Let's go. You can't just lie here forever. He helped his brother up, cautiously taking each step. He couldn't hold back his tears. Why? Why are you so light? How much have you been starving yourself? The door leading outside was right in front of him. Cold air lashed against his face. Isaac hadn't seen light for a long time. Unexpectedly, this time he saw such a tragic scene. A giant monster had destroyed everything. Isaac reached out his hand. Snow was falling. Jonas, the ground is frozen. I can't bury you right now. We'll wait until spring and I will bury you in the family cemetery. And then I will rest, too. Time slowly passed. Trees began to sprout, bringing the warmth of spring closer. A butterfly landed on the hilt of the sword. A simple grave had been erected. Isaac had finished burying his loved one. He tightly squeezed a stone. Isaac gently raised his hand, wrinkled with age. A blazing flame appeared. He smiled with relief. Do you see, Jonas? Isaac was deeply moved. Even if it's late, I finally did it. The stone in his hand shattered. After years of research, I had finally overcome this physique. Isaac collapsed, exhausted. Now I can finally rest, right? All these years, he had always tormented himself. Could I be forgiven, even if just a little? If I had been a little faster, if I hadn't wasted so much time in despair, would everything have changed? Isaac took his final breath beside his family. Time gradually passed, and he just lay motionless. Suddenly, someone called out in worry. Young master, are you having a nightmare? He vaguely recognized this voice. Hans. No. Hans passed away a long time ago. Dazzling light shone in from the window. Isaac started awake from his deep sleep. He had become much younger. Astonishment appeared on his face. Hans pulled back the curtain and asked, You're drenched in cold sweat, and your face is pale. Hans approached, worried. Did you not sleep well? Isaac looked around suspiciously. Am I dreaming? Or is this the light reflecting before death? Hans looked at him, bewildered. Young master, that's dangerous. Young master Jonas, please come down. The childish voice made Isaac startle. I already said I'm fine. The boy turned back just in time. Jonas smiled brightly and called out, Brother. Isaac forced a smile in return, breaking out in a cold sweat. Jonas held a doll, sitting on the tree, smiling brightly at him. He put on an awkward smile, trying to force an expression as if nothing was wrong. Hans repeated his plea. I told you to come down already. It's not a dream. Isaac accepted reality. I have returned to the past. You, the one who started the journey. You, the one lonely until the end. Can you stand alone before the infinite of a lonely world where only mana and you yourself exist? Wake yourself up. Let go of your thoughts. Cast away the perspectives that have been deeply ingrained in your life. Break the chains of the past and become the true version of yourself. A new opportunity had come to him. Fragments of porcelain littered the room. The maids whispered to each other. This room is such a mess. The young master is truly ungrateful. Hot-tempered. Tomorrow, when a master returns, I will resign. They talked comfortably, perhaps because the illness made his temper increasingly sensitive. Hans was angry and about to rush forward. What are they saying? I'll go teach them a lesson. Isaac pulled him back. That's enough, Hans. He turned his head away, self-deprecatingly. They aren't wrong. Isaac couldn't bear it either. You shouldn't keep coming to visit me anymore. Hans, you were hurt just because you were near me today. He couldn't bear it, turning back with sad eyes, kneeling before him. No, young master. Hans persisted in comforting him. I still care about you. Right now, you're just going through a difficult phase. It will pass, and when it does, it won't be a big deal anymore. He smiled to reassure him. Isn't that just how life is? Just like that, the person who once smiled so brightly eventually lost his life in a mana explosion I caused myself. Everyone who cared about me died because of this heart. Isaac blamed himself. No, I am the one who killed them. Jonas called from outside. Brother, come play with me. Lyra said loudly, worried. Please come down, sir. Isaac gradually made up his mind. If this is reality, then what I must do? Hans smiled brightly, ready to receive orders. Yes, young master. Isaac commanded coldly. Get lost. Get out of my sight now. Hans was stunned for a moment. Then he obeyed. As you wish. He had made up his mind. This would be better. Being near me only invites danger. Hans paused for a moment, as if looking right through Isaac. Please don't try to carry everything on your own. Sometimes you could trust us too. Isaac didn't remember him ever saying those words. Or perhaps he was still dreaming because he wanted to hear them. He swung his hand and slapped his own face. It hurts so much. Is this really reality? Then how did I die before? He looked outside again. Isaac made up his mind. Whether it's a dream or reality, it doesn't matter. I must prevent myself from having another mana explosion. In the past, there was someone else who was born with a unique physique. His name was Zeke von Goethe. He reached a realm no human could. A level 10 archmage. And he was my many times great-grandfather. After investigating underground, I found the notes he left behind. Thanks to that, I better understand how to utilize this special physique. After many years of meticulous research, I found a way to overcome it. Isaac finished it very quickly. This is the first step. Rune Stone, the ultimate crystallization of my findings engraved on mana stone, then burned and fused to create a rune stone. He lamented to himself. His hands used to tremble from old age, but now it's too easy. It's so good to be young again. To prevent the side effects of this unique physique, mana explosions. The mana container must withstand the chaotic flow inside. But my mana flows so fast and violently that the container cannot withstand it. An ordinary person would die the moment it shatters. But strangely enough, my container regenerates as if it had never been destroyed. Because of that, it can explode 10 or 20 times. Isaac couldn't help but say to himself, I truly am a disaster. This rune stone helps to replace mana pathways safe. A continuous shock force is applied to the damaged area, thereby forming new pathways. Thanks to this, the impulse of the violent mana flow is dispersed. He pondered deeply. The success rate is extremely low. Before I died, I only succeeded once. Isaac still remembered it vividly. That tiny flame was the proof. He began tensely. Will it succeed this time? The intense flame flared up, but it was unexpectedly large. Isaac was extremely surprised. He was quite happy with this transformation. He couldn't control it. This power. Isaac's heart ached violently. The pathways had reacted. The flow of mana ran throughout his body. Isaac was stunned, not understanding. The stone in his hand lit up, and a small flame sparked from it. It grew larger and more intense. He realized with joy. I knew it. The pathways have increased to 3. Isaac was stunned for a moment. Each pathway has its own function and route. Now I can cast 3 spells at the same time. It's working. He calmed himself down. No, this was not my goal. My goal is to prevent any more mana explosions from happening. That is why 3 pathways are not enough. I must use magic more often to expand the pathways and reduce the burden on the mana container. Until I achieve that, I won't let anyone stay by my side. Time passed quickly. It was evening. Hans smiled brightly and brought things over. It's time to eat, young master. He acted as if nothing was wrong. Cold-cut sandwiches. Isaac didn't know what else to say. I told you to go out. Hans didn't listen. You've been eating so little lately. Please have a bite. He was completely helpless. The man didn't listen to a word he said. Isaac couldn't understand it. And what is this sweet, gentle tone? He was extremely enthusiastic. I will leave as soon as you take a bite. Hurry up. He tried probing. Hans, how old am I? Hans replied, You are 12 years old this year, sir. Isaac took a bite. I guess I have to act like a normal child of this age. He took a bite. Isaac realized immediately. This bread must have been made by the nanny. It's been a long time since I tasted this flavor again. He gobbled up his dinner, making Hans beam with joy. Isaac suddenly remembered. Where's the nanny? I didn't see her today. Hans explained. Yes. Her son has pneumonia. Isaac froze slightly. The soup not yet swallowed. He put his spoon down on the table. So, she has returned home, he commented coldly. A nanny leaving her post because of her child. In other families, she wouldn't be allowed to keep working. This truly is a benevolent family. Hans's eyes widened in surprise, as if he didn't expect the young master to say that. The fire in the room crackled. Isaac pondered thoughtfully. He instinctively clenched his hands. Isaac decided to ask, Is Hinder the only one with pneumonia? He breathed a sigh of relief. Hans revealed, No, sir. All the children in that village have the disease. He nodded, confirming, I understand. I remember now. The epidemic broke out at this time. Black Goose Village was the source. The nanny lost her son in this incident and lived her whole life in inconsolable pain. At the end of her life, Lyra had said, It's a good thing, young master. Isaac whispered to himself. I don't want her to have to go through that again. He propped his chin up and thought. The cause of the pneumonia remains a mystery. The meal was momentarily left unfinished. Isaac changed his train of thought and jumped up. Hans, have there been any monsters killed in that area recently? Late one night, a large deer was leisurely walking in the forest. Suddenly, it startled, sensing danger. A fireball suddenly attacked the deer. It panicked and fled. Isaac slowly approached, showing regret. I thought it was a wolf. Isaac continued deep into the forest. He was heading straight for Black Goose Village. Hans was quite surprised by Isaac's question. A monster hunted in Black Goose Village? He tried to remember. I myself didn't see it very clearly. but people from the magic tower came here to buy its carcass as research material. Hans didn't pay much attention at the time. I glanced at it a little then. It looked exactly like a giant spider covered in silver fur. Isaac quickly narrowed down the target. If Hans's description was accurate, then that monster was definitely, Isaac stated with certainty, winter spider. Winter spiders aren't inherently powerful monsters. However, they usually form large swarms due to their astonishing reproductive rate. The difficult problem lies in the amount of mana these creatures possess. If exposed to high-density mana, the body will suffer from mana poisoning. Then, that toxin will cause the victim to gradually suffocate. Isaac was collecting a large amount of medicinal herbs, working tirelessly. The children in Black Goose Village must have been poisoned by the mana emitted by the winter spiders. He had soon filled his bag with herbs. Isaac had found a reason. But in this era, knowledge about mana poisoning is still very limited. That's why they mistook this disease for pneumonia. He looked back at his basket. The many herbs should be enough. Giving this to the children will help soothe the symptoms. Isaac knew exactly how to deal with this disease. But the effectiveness was only temporary. To prevent the disease from recurring, the monster swarm must be completely eradicated. I could ask my parents for help. But my father is frequently stationed at the border fortress, and my mother is busy traveling across the continent searching for a cure for my special physique. Isaac whispered to himself, if I just sit and wait for them, Hinder's life will fall into critical condition once again. Isaac quickly arrived at the village. He headed straight to the nanny's house. Lyra was sitting anxiously by the sickbed. She startled when she heard the noise, cautiously opening the door. Who's there? Lyra was shocked to the point of numbness. When Isaac pulled his hood down, you look haggard, Nanny. Lyra gasped in surprise. Young master, she asked worriedly. Why are you here at this hour? And what's wrong with your clothes? Did something happen at the mansion? Lyra carefully wiped the dust off his face. My goodness, you're covered in mud. Isaac felt a little touched, about to enter inside. You haven't come to work for many days, so I just dropped by to see how you were doing. She startled and blocked him. Wait, you can't go in. Lyra was just afraid Isaac would catch the disease. They said Hinder has pneumonia. What if you catch the disease? Isaac took out a mask and put it on. Is this okay now? She truly didn't dare. But sir, Isaac handed a large bag to Lyra. Don't worry about that. Take this. She asked blankly. What's in here? He replied briefly. Crushed or ground herbs, put them in a pot and decoct twice. Let it cool, and give it to him. Isaac headed straight into the inner room. He stood by the sickbed observing. Isaac immediately concluded, these purple-blue spots are definitely mana poisoning. He shook the patient to wake him. Hinder, do you hear me? He struggled to lift his eyelids. Just awake, Hinder pleaded. Young master, please don't fire my mother. Even while coughing, he tried to explain. Mom hasn't been able to work regularly all because of me. It's because I'm sick. Isaac assured him, I won't fire her. He checked Hinder's temperature. Your mother is the only one who secretly gave me barley bread. Just focus on resting so you can recover quickly. Time passed quickly to the next morning. He was guided by a healer. This is the abandoned mine you're looking for. Isaac peered inside. Are you sure this is a limestone cave? It's so dark in here. He stated firmly. Yes, I'm sure. Isaac offered gold coin as payment. Thank you. This is far enough. Leave the rest to me. The healer looked back and advised. Be careful. There have been people missing around this area before. Isaac replied while walking. Thanks for the warning. He had ruled out other areas. Winter spiders usually prefer limestone caves. Since this is the only limestone cave in this region, it's very likely this is their nest. Isaac had prepared in advance. Well then, before entering, flashes of light appeared around him. Need to prepare a little bit. Last time, thanks to opening new pathways in the mana system, I was able to cast 3 types of magic simultaneously. With this ability, the power emitted could rival level 2 magic. However, everything has its limits. If overexerted, my mana container could shatter. Isaac calculated very carefully. Since he didn't know how many winter spiders were inside, he couldn't use magic arbitrarily. That's why he needed this. Icy belladonna. Usually, its fruit would be diluted to be used as an anesthetic or sedative. It looked exactly like what was described in books, but to the winter spiders, this is a deadly poison. He decisively pulled them up. It's ridiculous that they live in the same environment as their own fatal weakness. How ironic. Time passed quickly until noon. Isaac had a bag full of icy belladonna. His hands were aching. I should have at least brought gloves. The toxicity is really strong. Isaac felt it was okay. All right, that's enough preparation. I crafted a lot of rune stones at the mansion, so now I must be on my way. He moved deeper inside. The cave grew darker and darker. Isaac stopped before a vertical cliff. Strong wind blew up to where he was standing. Losing one's life in a place like this would truly be a meaningless death. Isaac looked around searching. It seems to be right down here, but how to get down there? He happened to see a rope ladder, which looked like it could still be used quite well. Isaac was a bit tense, but didn't hesitate much. He followed the ladder down, safely landing on the lower level. Isaac was tired to the point that his hands and feet were trembling. He furrowed his brows. Seems like I found the right place. Before Isaac's eyes lay piles of dry bones. The corpses stacked on the floor looked as if all their bodily fluids had been drained out. And here is a human collarbone. Could these be the missing people the hunter mentioned? A jarring noise echoed near him. Isaac startled. The pressure grew closer and closer. He cautiously prepared to confront them. The magic power in his hand grew stronger. He was ready to fight. Isaac threw a fireball at the winter spiders, successfully creating a safety zone. These creatures are very afraid of fire, so this would help drive them away for a moment. Isaac unloaded his gear. I need to be ready before being surrounded by them. He used a mask to cover his nose and mouth, then took out the icy belladonna. He closed his eyes tightly to focus intensely. Isaac set his eyes on the target. First is the herb. He decisively set the bag of belladonna on fire. A faint, poisonous scent spread through the air. The winter spiders seemed to slow down. They hesitated, not daring to attack, trying to back away to create distance. This is Isaac's chance. All right, let the hunt begin. He stood up abruptly, filled with spirit. Inside a study room, Isaac sat working at the desk. Suddenly, a loud voice rang out from outside. What on earth did you do to make things this bad, huh? Isaac curiously stepped out near the window to look down. Watch your tongue. You are standing in front of the noble lord. Liam yelled angrily. Right now, I'm questioning the master of this land as to why you failed to protect your own people. Why did you abandon Black Goose Village like that? What? The other person suddenly barked. Shut your mouth immediately. Isaac turned around and went back to his seat. So noisy. Maybe I should tell them to use boards to cover up those windows? Or maybe I should just move down to the basement. It's quiet down there, and no one passes by. That way I can focus on researching my special condition better. By the way, I should cover the walls with Marium, because of the mineral with high magic resistance. It will be very helpful when dealing with mana explosions. Isaac looked up and asked, What do you think, Hans? The room was empty. There was no one but him. Isaac stared blankly. He whispered softly, That's right, Hans has. Isaac lowered his head and busied himself writing further. A scratching sound echoed. The space became quiet again. His writing speed increased. Isaac's eyes widened, looking down. He wrote more and more passionately. His eyes opened wide, looking terrifying. The whole room was left with only the sound of the pen writing. At this moment, in a cave, the scent was still lingering in the air. Isaac sat still and lost in thought. He looked up and muttered to himself, Why do I keep dwelling on these old memories? The winter spiders. It seems the ice hemlock poison is working quite well. I can't feed the poison directly to those monsters, but if I burn it and let the smoke spread like this, their bodies will gradually go numb until they suffocate and die. Of course, I'm not exactly safe from the smoke myself, which is why I have to wrap a wet handkerchief around my face as a primary filter, and then use the mana within my body to purify the rest. At the same time, I created a small fireball and used phase shifting to maintain the balance between purification, fire magic, and the phase shift technique. Now I am able to develop 3 types of magic simultaneously through 3 mana circuits, also known as multi-circuiting. Thanks to that, I've been able to stall for time until the spiders started to weaken. Isaac pointed his finger forward. A massive explosion occurred immediately, blowing the spiders to pieces. He walked leisurely through the sea of fire. Suddenly, Isaac sensed something strange behind him. He pondered. It seems like all of them are fleeing in the same direction. Isaac's eyes glinted. Looks like there's a water source over there. He picked up his pace. Isaac's clothes suddenly caught fire, so he quickly took them off. These things are seriously flammable, but at this rate, I'll end up suffocating from smoke. Plus, it's way too hot. Isaac threw the shirt on the ground. Need to end this quickly. At night, the cave became freezing cold. He followed the path of the flowing water. Isaac shivered, hugging himself. It's freezing in here. I shouldn't have tossed my coat away. I didn't expect the temperature to drop low enough to freeze everything. He suddenly lifted his head. Wait, above Isaac was a nest of eggs. Are they all eggs? If it laid this many eggs. Suddenly a sound rang out, and he was startled by the noise. Isaac quickly turned to look, his eyes wide, trying to focus on what was happening. The eggs were slowly falling down. He regained his composure and raised his hand. Isaac launched a burst of flames forward. The sound of fire flapping echoed. He stared in confusion at the scene. A drop of sweat rolled down Isaac's cheek. A massive spider suddenly appeared behind him. Isaac felt it immediately. Just as it lunged at him, he took off running. Isaac darted forward to dodge. He turned around to look. Damn it. Why is it that my gut feelings are never wrong? Isaac was stunned to see that it was a winter queen spider, completely different from its kin. It is a monster capable of resisting fire and carrying the breath of frost. That is exactly why they're called what they are, winter spiders. The spider quickly lunged forward. He scrambled to his feet to attack. A ball of fire slammed into its face. Isaac gritted his teeth and thought. As expected, just a few fireballs aren't enough to make it burn like the others. The only consolation is that its movements aren't very agile. Suddenly, a wave of pain hit his body. My body is reaching its limit. With a 12-year-old body that has zero combat experience, it's only natural that staying up all night and using magic all day would lead to this. While Isaac was contemplating, the spider advanced. He tried his best to lift his head. Isaac's eyes narrowed slightly as images from the past surfaced. Oh, the barley bread Hans brought is really delicious. In this barren northern region, where not even wheat can grow, the reason I get to eat soft white bread is all thanks to the Nan. Because I'm a picky eater and absolutely hate black bread, she went all the way to a distant city every week to buy the finest flour. Isaac suddenly smirked. Why get back? I have to ask her to make plenty of it. He pulled a shovel out of his backpack. Even if it is a queen spider, at the end of the day, it's just an arthropod. Isaac also took off his backpack. The backpack dangled in his hand before hitting the ground with a loud clang and shattering. The spider raised its rock-hard legs to defend itself. Its eyes turned blood red. He grabbed the shovel and ran straight toward it. His face became more serious. The shovel plunged straight into the spider's eye, and a stream of blue blood spurted out hideously. Its painful screech echoed. Isaac gritted his teeth and retreated. He slid under the spider's belly and grabbed its leg with one hand. A loud noise resounded, and both fell down. Isaac rubbed against the ground, struggling to hold on. I still lack the accuracy to shoot them, and I have no energy left to keep launching fireballs. Even if I'm lucky enough to hit, I can't land a fatal blow on a fire-resistant creature. In that case, I have to give up on long-range attacks. This thing is completely different from the previous fireballs. Isaac frowned, speaking angrily. Condense it a little more. He swung his hand and punched it hard. Just die already and get out of my sight. A large section of the spider's back was frozen solid. He immediately sensed it lunging at him. It tried to get back up, furiously charging at him as if delivering a finishing blow. A scream full of pain echoed through the cave. It rolled back and forth on the ground. It repeatedly spewed out blue attacks. Isaac reached out to grab something. I have to pull my hand out now, but his hands are soaked in blood and shaking uncontrollably, making it impossible. Isaac let out a sigh of relief. Got out. A moment later, the spider's body was still burning. Both of them lay sprawled on the ground, and a stone fell out of its body, looking exactly like a gem. He slowly opened his eyes. Where am I? Noisy arguing came from outside. Did you report to them that the young master snuck out of the mansion? Is this the nanny's voice? I wouldn't dare say a word. If that gets out, everything will go into chaos. Is that Hans? Hans replied in confusion. But do you really know nothing? Isn't it said that the young master went all the way to that abandoned mine? Lyra put a hand to her face. I have no idea either. A local hunter guided him there. But since then, he's been busy hunting, so he doesn't know the specific situation either. Isaac thought to himself, right, I took down the Winter Queen spider and passed out after hitting my head on the ground. Good thing I woke up right after and struggled to crawl out of the ruins to return to the village. After that, I ran into Hans standing at the entrance to the village. Seeing him collapse, he panicked and fainted. Isaac slowly opened his eyes. That's right. Thanks to doing exactly as the young master said, little Hinder has fully recovered. Hans smiled gently. That's just the young master's nature. It's true that after the mana explosion, he became a bit more sensitive, but how could that kind heart of his ever change? Hearing this, Isaac felt embarrassed. He sat up abruptly. Hans looked over in a hurry. Young master, are you awake? Isaac asked, how long have I been asleep? Hans replied, you've been asleep for about half a day, sir. How are you feeling? I'm fine. It's still within my endurance. Lyra scolded him a bit angrily. What do you mean endurance? Why would you go to such a dangerous place all by yourself? Isaac was silent for a moment before saying, I just accidentally fell while picking some herbs around there. Even if I told them a 12-year-old killed a monster, they'd just think I was talking nonsense. Better to just make up some excuse. Anyway, how is Hinder doing? The boy was lying on the bed, eyes closed, but his complexion looked healthier. Lyra sighed and answered, thanks to the herbs you brought, he has improved a lot. Same goes for the other children in the village. Isaac lifted his head and smiled with relief. It's best to keep the mana-poisoning matter quiet. If the higher-ups find out, the scholars will immediately intervene. Are all the winter spiders dead? Who could have done such a thing? It would be troublesome if the bodies of the spiders in the mine were discovered. Lyra asked unexpectedly, but how did you know so much about those herbs? Even the doctor sent by the Lord didn't know anything about them. Isaac immediately looked away. I just happened to read about it in some books somewhere. Let's not talk about that anymore. It's time to go. Hans. He looked confused right now. It's snowing quite heavily outside, sir. Isaac turned to leave the bed. If it comes out that I snuck out of the mansion, your fate won't be very good either. Isn't that right? Lyra brought a basket of fruit to Isaac. Please take these too, sir. The villagers asked me to give them to you to express their gratitude. He picked up one and looked at it. Nanny, you should rest for another week. You won't be able to work with peace of mind until Hinder has fully recovered, right? She looked a bit awkward. Would that be okay? The head butler will surely not let it slide. Isaac said abruptly. Who said I'm just letting you rest? He held up an apple and ordered, use these to make jam. She asked, apple jam, sir? Isaac took a bite and replied, yes. To eat with barley bread on the day you return to work. Lyra was a bit dazed. Then she smiled, tears welling up in the corners of her eyes. Would it be okay to make apple pie as well? Isaac smiled in approval. That sounds great. In the morning, the sky was clear and sunny. At a large mansion, Isaac was running while breathing. A week passed. His speed was incredibly fast. During that time, his mana circuits also underwent a transformation. The 3 mana circulation cycles had increased by 1, bringing the total to 4. Thanks to that, the mana circuits were also significantly more stable. The number of spells I can cast at the same time has also increased to 4 layers. Fighting the winter spiders and pushing myself to the limit probably helped a lot. The diligent efforts of running every day surely also contributed significantly. Using magic requires thorough calculation as well as keen intuition. It's a process that consumes a lot of mental energy. When the body is exhausted, the mind will collapse as well. A clear mind needs a resilient physical foundation. The reason I quickly reached my limit at that abandoned mine was because of this underdeveloped body that hasn't been trained. In my past life, Lucas often trained my physical fitness for me. Images of Lucas smiling appeared, and his face suddenly sank. A sudden call rang out. Young master, Schiller Broadandrine. Today is your routine checkup, sir. Isaac stopped and wiped his sweat. Head Butler Schiller placed a hand on his chest and smiled brightly. Greetings, young master. How are you feeling today? This is my father's personal doctor, the most famous physician in the surrounding regions. Go ahead and proceed here. Andrine stepped forward to observe. It seems there are no serious problems today. In fact, you look healthier than ever. Then I will start adjusting your prescription. Isaac thought indifferently. Just making assumptions like that? He opened his briefcase. Inside were 6 vials of medicine. This is a medicinal herb called panacea. It helps stabilize the flow of mana. Isaac picked up a vial to look at it. Panacea, huh? Father really went to great lengths to find me top-tier stuff. In common language, panacea is understood as a cure-all. For some, it is used as a stimulant and a physical performance enhancer for soldiers. Although this drug is known for its ability to stabilize mana flow, to make it run more smoothly, in reality, that is a misunderstanding arising during the translation of ancient texts. Its true effect is to stimulate the flow of mana. In other words, it is no different from poison to someone who has lost control of mana like me. However, with the current situation, it will act as a suitable catalyst. If used well, it will help me increase my mana circulation cycles. Then I'll see you next month. All right, you've worked hard. After Andrine left, Isaac turned around to see Schiller looking at him. Do you have something to say? Schiller replied. You seem quite calm today. He put on a confused face. Normally, wouldn't you fly into a rage when being examined, sir? That is also why all the doctors in the territory refused to be your personal physician. Isaac laughed when he heard this. Is that so? Should I have been angry? Schiller was silent for a moment, then moved his lips. The next sentence made him freeze. I heard that you cured the pneumonia for the children in Black Goose Village. Isaac asked calmly, You know about that too? Schiller answered straightforwardly, I just heard Hans talking about it, sir. Isaac thought to himself, So you interrogated Hans? Schiller's face became angry. If this were made public, the advisory council certainly wouldn't let it go. I will let it slide this time, but from now on, I hope you will know how to exercise more self-control. Schiller's gaze looked at him coldly. For a long time, I could never get close to Schiller. He was always a dry and rigid-head butler, a cold old man, always keeping his distance from everyone. But Schiller suddenly picked up Isaac's suitcase. If you really cannot help yourself, then at least discuss it with me first. He was also surprised by that sight. According to what Jonas said, right before he passed away, Schiller, who had served the von Goethe family since the previous master's time, remained at his post until the von Goethe house fell. And then he sacrificed his own life. In fact, he always deeply cared for this family. Isaac nodded and smiled. I understand. Thank you, Schiller. He just stayed silent and didn't say anything. Schiller thought for a moment and asked, By the way, you are still running every day? Is there a special reason for that, sir? Isaac looked up and glanced at him. Throughout history, every mage who reached level 5 or higher trained their body strictly. If it is a body used to conduct mana, shouldn't it need an equivalent foundation of physical fitness? Schiller's eyes widened slightly in surprise. In the evening, inside a room, there was a report that the eldest young master had completely cured the pneumonia for the children in Black Goose Village. The verification process was complete. Given the characteristics of this physical condition, the young master will find it difficult to use magic in the future. However, I humbly suggest that the path of becoming a scholar or alchemist might be suitable for him. With this, His Excellency the Lord will surely be relieved of some of his worries. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Commain, a maid entered. Excuse me, sir. Schiller looked up. Rosa, it's you again. She replied with a bit of fear. Please forgive me. Head butler, the maids keep disappearing and never return. I don't know about Clara's case, but as for Annette, she's a very hard-working girl who hadn't missed a day of work for the past 3 years. The corners of Rosa's eyes reddened. I'm sure something terrible has happened to her. In some corner. Isn't this strange? The servants were standing and talking among themselves. In just 2 short months, 3 maids had already gone missing. Do you think so? This G region is not exactly an easy place to live, Bill said smugly. Because it's located in the far north, the weather is extremely harsh. On top of that, bandits and monsters are constantly harassing them. Lily pointed at him. So you mean you're planning to pack up and run away too? Hey, I was just making an assumption. She lowered her head slightly and said, But at least Annette isn't the type of person who would suddenly disappear without a word of farewell. How hard did she have to work to earn money for her father's medicine? Bill smirked and retorted, Maybe she got sick of the scene of having to serve that sickly father of hers. Who knows? Maybe she ran off with some lover. Rosa and Lily were furious. Watch your mouth. Bill spread his arms calmly. Just kidding. Actually, I have my own suspicions. I don't care if you listen or not. Here, Bill suddenly put on a scary look. In my opinion, it's like this. A bold thought popped into his head. Could this be due to dark magic? The 2 girls were also stunned. Dark magic? What else could it be? After all, this is the mansion of a family of mages, right? Not to mention the young master's condition hasn't been looking good lately. If you were the owner of this house, wouldn't you be willing to use magic at any cost? Lily let it slip. You mean those missing girls were taken to be used as living sacrifices? Rosa shouted immediately. What the hell are you rambling about, Bill? If you dare to weave such bizarre rumors again, I won't let it slide. He continued to speak. And if you don't let it slide, what are you going to do? Me? Maybe I'm right. Rosa yelled in anger. The master isn't that kind of person. He was even generous enough to take in a sinner like you. Bill remained stubborn. What? You go on, and now you're starting to yell. Behind his back, a voice suddenly made him jump. This story sounds truly interesting. Isaac crossed his arms and looked at Bill, asking, Why don't you tell me the details? He said fearfully, It started 2 months ago, sir. Bill's eyes glanced elsewhere. First, the maid Hilda suddenly disappeared. Then a few weeks later, it was Clara's turn, and she was nowhere to be found. Finally, this weekend, Annette went to the ceremony and vanished without a trace. The room suddenly fell silent. Isaac asked coldly, Do you know why? Bill thought for a moment before speaking. Why does a child have such a terrifying gaze? I'm not too sure about that, sir. Isaac immediately said, Just tell the truth. I promise I won't punish you for this. He asked back in surprise, Is the young master serious? My word is naturally the truth. Bill lowered his head in silence, and Isaac suddenly asked, making him confused, Do you think the cause of this is me? Isn't that already obvious? Young master, just look at Hans. He's your closest servant, yet he's always covered in cuts and bruises, and that guy is always groaning in pain. I'm not sure about those people. Bill's voice grew quieter. It's highly likely it's him. I shouldn't have opened my mouth. Isaac spoke in a somber tone. Bill begged fearfully, Please, young master, spare my life. I haven't even taken a wife yet. I don't even have a single child. The priest once said this life was a gift from God. Isaac looked at Bill calmly. You don't want to die, do you? Isaac held out his hand to offer. Then serve me to make up for your mistakes. The man who was begging froze. The night was dark. The sound of the wind rustled. A bundle of blue fire floated in the air. Isaac sat on the bed and looked up at the sky. Rosa, Annette. The images of the 2 girls appeared in the fire, and he spoke with an indifferent expression. That's right. Those are their names. Since Hans and my nanny were lost, they were the only maids who volunteered to stay and serve me. The medicine bottle fell to the ground and shattered, and a drop of blood dripped down. Isaac waved his hand, ordering, Both of you, get out. I want to be alone in peace. The 2 maids were terrified, but Rosa tried to speak. Young master, what about your hand? He immediately shouted. Didn't you hear me tell you to get out? These medicines are useless anyway. Don't ever bring them here again. Rosa, though afraid, still said, But young master, please don't lose hope so quickly. Everything will definitely be fine. His face darkened, his voice ice-cold. Hope? How can you understand the feeling of taking the life of the person you love most with your own hands? Isaac's fist tightened. Can you imagine that pain? She looked at him in confusion. Annette stepped forward and said, I understand. I myself have caused my friend to lose her life with these very hands. Hearing that, he lowered his voice. Your friend? Rosa glanced downward. Annette continued. Back then, if only I had looked back at Clara just once. If I had reached out in time, maybe I could have saved her. Annette bowed her head to look at him. I understand the young master's situation is extremely special. But in this world, everyone can accidentally do things against their will. At least once in a lifetime. That can happen to anyone. At that time, Annette's own pessimism brought me a strange comfort. Back to the present. I should have asked her more about this. Suddenly, a knock sounded on the door, and a voice from outside echoed. Reporting to the young master, It is me, Bill. He sat on the bed and asked, Have you found any trace of those maids yet? He replied quickly, Yes. I didn't take much time to find them. I went to inquire with the beggars along the main roads, and their stories all match up perfectly. Isaac listened and asked further. So what is the result? Bill explained clearly. It turns out it's all the work of human traffickers. They use sweet words to promise to take people to the prosperous south, then secretly sell them off. He asked in confusion. If they wanted to go south, they could go by themselves. Why must they go through brokers? Bill raised his hand and smirked. Young master, you still don't understand the world. There's the transport for a long journey to the south, then the money to hire mercenaries for protection against bandits along the way, and then you have to worry about paperwork to get a free status when you arrive. Do you think a group of fragile women could manage all of that on their own? Isaac rested his chin on his hand to think. I see. That sounds reasonable. Bill sighed to himself. Kids will always be kids. This boy knows nothing about the real world. A thought popped into Bill's head. Wait, could this be? He spoke up suddenly. I had to pay a decent amount to get those beggars to open their mouths, sir. That's why I spent all the travel money you gave me. Please give me a little more, young master, he asked in disbelief. All 20 silver coins? That's equivalent to half a year's wages. Bill laughed loudly in response. Isaac thought to himself, everyone is just being too guarded, that's all. He spoke, a little money is no problem. What I need is to find them as quickly as possible. Bill beamed. Oh my, the young master is indeed very generous. Is there anything else you need me to do, sir? Isaac replied immediately. Yes, I will ensure you are rewarded handsomely for this job. Do you want to try it? Bill clenched his fist happily. Of course. I've caught a fat chicken this time. Sure enough, in this life, you only need a silver tongue to live well. If I can lead this kid around by the nose, I'll definitely make a fortune from now on. This is truly a golden goose that just appeared. The only drawback is that this kid is like a ticking time bomb. But oh well, if you don't take risks, how can you hit the jackpot? He was as happy as can be and said to him, I can lead you to the broker's place right away. The sound of his laughter grew louder in Bill's head. If you live, you have to risk it. After that, he stood behind the bars, dumbfounded. Inside was full of skulls and dust, and he only had his shorts on. Bill grabbed the iron bars and shouted, How did things turn out like this? Isaac stood in a corner looking at him. Why do I have to be in this hellhole? He held a mana stone, smiling enigmatically. In the dungeon, there was a small canal in the middle. His hand gripping the iron frame trembled. Bill gnashed his teeth in anger. Damn it. How did it end up like this? He recalled the story before. Everything was still fine when I snuck the young master out of the mansion to Burnt City. Meeting the broker who took the maids was easy. He said he was a noble going to the south. However, at that time, the broker's face suddenly turned somber, but his eyes swept over Isaac's high-end, exquisite attire, then looked at that beautiful, clean face. The broker's face broke into a sleazy smile. I understand why the young master easily falls into the sights of human traffickers. After all, the young master has a good-looking face. Bill thought of his own stripped body, left with only boxer shorts, but why did I end up like this? He grimaced and turned back. Moreover, the young master, Isaac, still hasn't been harmed at all. It means they didn't even dare to touch a strand of his hair because he is high-quality goods. And not like in the books at all, he is focusing on his own business. Do I need to condense more mana? Bill is furious. While I've been stripped from head to toe, except for my underwear, unable to take it anymore, he spoke loudly. So what do we do now? We've come all this way. You must have a plan, right? Right? Bill questioned him urgently. Stop playing with that stone. Say something. Isaac just calmly reminded. Where did you put your manners? But he no longer cared. Can you still use manners now in my position? We're about to die. Bill let out a breath. I will go find Annette and the others. Of course you must too, if you have a way out of these bars. Suddenly he raised his hand, and behind him, there was a vibrating sound. Immediately after, the iron frame was gouged with a hole and fell out. Bill's expression immediately turned to amazement. He began to change his voice and call out gently. Young master, Bill gave a flattering smile. You won't leave me here, right? Isaac replied casually. Don't you know me yet? He pleaded. Come on, don't be like that. His voice spread outside. This place is like a maze. Two jailers started to become alert. What's that sound? Go check it out. Bill was still threatening him. You might get lost and be robbed. Unexpectedly, Isaac turned away to leave. You think I can't handle that much? Then I'm going. Good luck. Wait, young master. He called out in a panic. He stopped and turned his head back. Bill suddenly knelt down to the ground. He pleaded earnestly. Please save me. I beg you. Everything. I will do anything. His footsteps stopped. Isaac's eyes were covered with a layer of contemplation. He thought to himself, you know what? Bill looked at his form. I've seen you do this before. Overlapping images from the past appeared. Please save my life, master. Back then he had also pleaded. I must have lost my mind. I shouldn't have done that when you were kind enough to take me into work. Sir, Von Gerda sternly said, Bill, you used to be a bandit. When von Goethe overwhelmed the bandits, you survived by handing over information about your organization. But this time you betrayed the von Goethe house. He decided that I can no longer trust you. He tried to beg for mercy and fear. Sir, please spare me this once. Schiller couldn't stand it and shouted, Enough! He questioned him directly. Do you think the crime of trying to sell von Goethe's secret books to a criminal organization can be taken lightly? Bill cried continuously. Please, sir, I will never betray you again. But in the end, that sword came down to finish him off. Von Goethe said, You would have been quite useful if you weren't so greedy. Isaac's face was expressionless. I still vaguely remember that day. With a bandit accustomed to the underground economy, Bill Chuck found the servants using what he knew. And perhaps using up all the silver coins was also his lie. He pondered. If my memory is correct, the criminal organization that Bill tried to sell secret books to in my past life is also the one that kidnapped the servants. Now the bastards have expanded their power through human trafficking and will quickly spread in von Goethe like mold and then torture people too. Anything that could be a threat to the family must definitely be destroyed first. At this moment, he took a scroll out of his shirt. You said you would do anything, right? He held it out in front of Bill. Then I have this that I need you to do first. In the room with dim lights, next to the dining table, several men were lining up. One was cutting meat on a plate. Father, you aren't eating anything again. He put a piece of meat into his mouth. The guards turned pale, covering their mouths and listening. Please, father, eat something. How can I stand to see you getting thinner like this? NEA's held up a fork pointing forward. You're in there, aren't you? Opposite was a skull hanging on a wooden stake. Wait a little longer, until the day I succeed with dark magic. We will see each other again. He sighed miserably. You aren't answering again. Has your soul weakened already? Suddenly NEA's asked someone standing nearby. Hey, where's my bathwater? He stuttered, and the only ones remaining now were the goods prepared to be sold. Suddenly a large hand smashed down. NEA's lifted him up with just one hand. Red blood began to spurt out, splashing onto his face. The rest were terrified hearing him say, This punishment is probably enough for me to bathe, right? NEA's glanced at them. I will wait. The subordinate immediately replied, I will prepare it right away. Then he left for the dark hallway. The room now only had 2 people and a corpse. One held his head and sighed, Damn dark magic. This is the what th time already? In that bastard's food, in that guy's bathwater. Next time just give him the goods we were supposed to sell. Otherwise we will all die. He stood up and flipped the corpse. Stop complaining and take good care of him. Suddenly a sound rang out. The 2 looked out the door curiously, but the dark hallway was empty. They glanced at each other. Suddenly both of their faces turned panic. The sound made them afraid. What was that sound? The faces of the 2 were no longer calm. Someone quietly swallowed a gulp. Suddenly something appeared. NEA's head, full of hair, rolled to their feet. Immediately after, NEA's bloody, wide-eyed face appeared. The 2 were immediately terrified. The immense fear made their legs unable to stand steady. Just then, a figure walked over. He held a blood-stained blade. Give me some water. Everyone's face turned pale. That is Bill, smiling slightly. His blood-covered appearance made them horrified. Bill! He ran his hand through his hair and repeated again. Give me a glass of water. You bastard. Their hearts beat rapidly. Thump, thump. Just then, a figure walked over. His blood-covered appearance made them horrified. Bill, his hand holding the knife, trembled slightly. Damn it, why did I do this? Bill's gaze couldn't hide his dissatisfaction. It was all because of that bastard. Before that, Isaac held out a piece of paper in front of him. You said you would do anything, right? Then do this first. Bill was stunned. What is this? He answered. This is a contract. Isaac summarized quickly. Article 1. Bill's side must comply with all orders from Party Isaac unconditionally. Article 2. Bill's side must not disclose any information related to Party A. Isaac. Finally, he emphasized, Article 3. If Party B violates any of the conditions, the penalty is death. Bill's face became panicked. Wait, what kind of condition is that? He pulled a knife from somewhere. You will sign it in blood. That is the only way for the magic to be effective. Great, this will work. He struggled. Are you crazy? How can I sign that? Suddenly a voice approached. Who's there? Isaac smiled lightly and reminded. Come on, I don't have much time. He hit his weak point. Don't you want to live? Outside, Footsteps were rushing closer. In front was a dangerous contract. The sound of thick saws running on the stone floor became clearer. Bill gritted his teeth, frowning tightly. Suddenly he struck hard, making the knife fall. Damn it. Next, Bill gritted his teeth and cut his fingertip. After that, he didn't hesitate to mark the paper. Just finished, the contract suddenly lit up. The corners of Isaac's mouth smiled slightly. Just then, the jailers also arrived. Who are you? How did you get out? Bill shouted in panic. They're here. Immediately after, the three were hit in the face. All of them passed out instantly and fell to the ground. He asked in confusion, Are they dead? Isaac explained, They're just knocked out. Bill still couldn't wrap his head around how it happened. Suddenly, the ice stone in his hand caught his eye, and he stared at the magic, completely dazed. They both walked into another room outside the prison. Bill held a knife and took the lead, smiling awkwardly as he struck up a conversation. That's the first time I've seen ice magic. You're truly amazing, sir. Isaac didn't think much of it, though, which was understandable. Ice magic wasn't very practical. He said in surprise, It's fine. He just replied dismissively. It only looks that way. Suddenly, Bill froze and whispered a warning. Bandits, 2 of them are hiding by the wall nearby. Isaac said, Bill, what do you need to make ice? That's a sudden question. He urged, Take a guess. He hesitated for a moment and answered, Wait, water. Isaac controlled a small amount of water. Exactly, whether it's the humidity in the air or a puddle on the ground, you have to shape the water however you want. The water swirled and followed a sequence. Compress, condense, expand, and evaporate. It has to go through these 4 states. He continued explaining diligently. Adjusting each state individually is easy, but performing them in succession is not. Bill looked toward the guard anxiously. We're going to get caught. Hurry up. One guy was yawning when he suddenly noticed something. Before he could react, he saw Isaac rushing toward them. Who are you guys? He coldly tapped his hand lightly, and finally, a large water sphere suddenly flew toward them. He could only stand there and take it without understanding anything. The guy's face went stiff, and immediately after, he was attacked. Phase shift magic. He retracted the water sphere. Because of all these steps, this type of magic isn't common in battle. Isaac's eyes flicked downward. If I didn't have this spell, I wouldn't bother using it either. He held the Ice Mana Stone in his hand. He'd found it on the carcass of the Winter Queen spider. Even though this magic isn't popular, the Ice Mana Stone has a certain academic value, so it was worth quite a bit. He thought to himself, what an unexpectedly good find. Bill walked over to check on the guard. If ice magic is that inconvenient, why bother using it? He was unconscious. He explained, because it's not common, very few people know about it. It's hard to distinguish from blunt force trauma, and since the ice melts, it doesn't leave any evidence behind, making this magic perfect for committing crimes in secret. That gloomy, terrifying expression made Bill stop in his tracks. He whispered, Aren't you going to finish them off? Just then, 2 others had discovered them. Who are they? How do we get out? Bill was still wondering. Even if you kill them, they'll just be replaced soon enough. He hid behind him, but won't they end up doing these things anyway? Isaac walked out and replied, That's exactly why I'm keeping them alive. The 2 who had just arrived were knocked out. He frowned slightly. The one I really want to kill. Unfamiliar footsteps appeared in their line of sight, and their alertness heightened. The massive body of NEAs approached. It was just him. He looked at them skeptically. You guys, Bill yelled in a panic. NEAs. He hurriedly accused him. Young master, he's the head of that gang. He's delusional enough to think he can tear people apart with his bare hands. He asked back, Is that so? But Isaac wasn't worried. At least it saves me the trouble of looking for him. The water sphere began to emit a faint light, and then an ice spike was created. He controlled it and launched it toward him. NEA's eyes widened as he was about to be pierced. Unexpectedly, he waved his hand and swatted it away. Bill exclaimed in astonishment. He blocked the ice with his bare hands. Isaac was also somewhat surprised. You've got some strength. Which tribe are you from? He started grumbling. Is this really the time to be complimenting him? What I do now? I'm going to be torn into 9 pieces. Suddenly, NEA spoke up. Hey, you guys. He chuckled happily. You guys are merchandise, right? I was worried about not having enough water to bathe. I'm in luck. NEA's gaze shifted to Isaac. And a mage, too. You'll make excellent ingredients for my dark magic. Bill heard this and started panicking. Wait, spare me, please. Not me. He slowly reached out his hand. He clutched his head and begged in fear. I'm just an ordinary person. Suddenly, his finger froze. Bill opened his eyes in confusion. The ice block behind him shot out a long ice spike that pierced his chest right before his eyes. Stunned, the ice block he had blocked earlier. At this moment, Isaac was still in his casting pose. Aeneas coughed up some blood. Seeing him collapse, he finally called for Bill. Isaac looked him in the eye and declared, "From now on, you're the leader of this place. You know what you need to do, right?" His face stiffened, and his hand gripped the knife tighter. Then Bill let out a shout and ran forward. Isaac stood there with a somewhat troubled expression. He closed his eyes and told himself, everyone has to do things they don't want to do at least once in their life. It happens to everyone. Annette's words echoed in his ears. You might not be able to redo or erase it. It will haunt you and leave a mark for the rest of your life. Young master, back then, she had said while wiping his blood-stained hands, you'll only be left with two choices. One is to endure the shame of that guilt, and the other is to try and live for that person too. Isaac's expression carried a deep sense of restraint. He recalled the past. Back then, Annette, burdened by the guilt of losing her friend Clara, had given him that advice. Ahead, some guards had already spotted him. Bill threatened, "Give me a cup of water, you bastard." He muttered to himself, "But I don't need to hear that advice a second time." The wheels of the cart turned as it moved. On the cart were Annette and the other maids. Even though their clothes were dirty, her eyes were still shining bright. Annette walked toward the castle because in this life, Annette wouldn't lose her friend. Hilda asked excitedly, "Have you heard? The nobles from the south are looking for women from outside the city." Hearing that, Clara couldn't help but be curious. Why's that? She guessed, are the women in the city too ugly? So they're looking for beautiful women from the outside to marry? She also started to have some thoughts of her own. Should I go to the south? Hilda covered her mouth mysteriously and said, I've looked into it a bit. Her cheeks turned a little red. There are people who can take us to the south. Just need to give them some money. Annette was sitting quietly and was caught off guard by the question. Hilda, Annette, do you want to go with us? But she refused. I think I'll pass. I still need to take care of my father. Now, Annette stood in the study reporting back. That was the last time I saw Hilda and Clara. We didn't see them again after that. Isaac thought to himself, just as Bill suspected. He asked again, were you kidnapped while you were looking for the two of them? Annette nodded in confirmation, her expression heavy. When I met them in the sewer, they had truly lost their minds. Her voice was desperate. If I had stayed there for a few more days, I probably would have gone crazy too. Isaac sympathized with that. It was understandable. He remembered that horrifying scene, as it was a place where people were either bought and sold or eaten. He was already 70 years old, not to mention these young girls. Suddenly, Annette confessed, actually, I could have escaped. Remembering it made her feel uncomfortable. The iron gate they used to lock me up was broken. Back then, Annette was standing in front of the bars, stunned. Next to her, a whimpering sound suddenly rang out. She turned and saw Clara with disheveled hair. In the depths of her heart, Annette couldn't help but be shaken. If I had stayed a few more days, her hand gripping the bars trembled, leaving Clara behind. Hearing that, Isaac's eyes also became pain. Annette continued, if I had, maybe I would have sent my friend to her death myself. That's what happened. He expressed his understanding and gratitude. It must have been very difficult for you to recall those memories. Thank you for telling me, she stammered, and Annette looked a bit flustered. There is one thing I'm still wondering about. He was curious. What is it? She recounted how the bandits brought them back to the mansion. Clara and I were very happy. Annette remembered that time, but bit her nails, trembling with fear. No, if I go back to the mansion. If I go back, I will. Hearing that, Isaac was also confused. If she goes back, will she die? She replied helplessly, yes. It seems it wasn't just that she was afraid of being punished. He rubbed his chin, thinking seriously. I think I understand now. I will look into it. Annette smiled and watched him for a moment, and suddenly she covered her mouth and giggled. Rosa said this. She said maybe the bandits suddenly let us go because of you. Young master, Annette is being ridiculous, isn't she? Isaac crossed his arms, thinking helplessly. She's quite insightful. She continued. But it actually makes sense, because the only person who pays attention to servants like us is you, young master. He was somewhat stunned, surprised by that remark. Isaac's blue eyes widened, and then he softly called, "Annette." Isaac said sincerely, "Thank you. I'm happy you think so." He was about to say more, but stopped himself. "And never mind. Let's talk later." Although she didn't quite understand, Annette didn't ask further. "Ah, yes, I'll go now." The door slowly closed. Isaac stretched his arms out comfortably, and his expression couldn't hide his relief. Isaac thought of Annette. "I've found an unexpected talent. Maybe teaching her magic is worth a try." That day, sunlight shone through the castle, and there were whispers and gossip. "Have you heard about the maids who just returned?" The maids gathered and whispered. They should have been fired. But now young Master Isaac has taken them back. "I heard he and the head butler had a huge argument over it. Why would he go that far just for some servants? Don't tell me he has feelings for them. The young master is at the age where he starts noticing women." Bill carried a tray into the warehouse and carefully set it down. Just then, a figure walked up. Jordan called out softly, "Boss Bill." He dusted off his hands. Bill frowned in dissatisfaction. "Damn it. I told you not to call me that." Bill, the new boss of the criminal organization. Before that, while escaping, Isaac had told him, "This sewer is always full of vagrants. Even if I clear out one organization in this environment, another group will rise up sooner or later." He advised, "Instead of doing that, wouldn't it be better to keep them under control and manage them?" Bill thought to himself, "You planned this from the beginning. Is that why you made me sign the contract?" He clutched his head, grinding his teeth in frustration. "Now, if there's any argument or rebellion, wouldn't my head be the first to be broken?" After that, he steadied his mood and sat down. Bill started asking about the situation. "Did NEAs only plant you guys in the mansion?" He replied, "Yes, the previous boss told us to keep an eye on the mansion." Hearing that, he sneered. That NEA's guy was always planting people in noble houses. "Looks like he wasn't just a damn lunatic." Jordan added, "And the boss always prepared a tribute." Bill frowned upon hearing this. "Tribute? What kind of tribute?" He explained, "The tribute is offered to the knights around this time of year. The reason we are willing to stay buried in this dump is because the knights have been protecting us." His face turned pale. "Knights are backing you guys up?" A few days later, in Isaac's bedroom, he created a fireball in his hand, and then Isaac swung it powerfully forward. His turquoise pupils shone brightly. The fire was just a feint. The real one was the ice pillar that followed right after it. The sphere was aimed at the wall in front. Suddenly, his hand clenched, and the fireball instantly vanished, leaving only the ice spike that slammed into the wall. The ice shattered into pieces, and afterwards, Isaac gasped for air. After killing NEAs, his mana circuit increased from 4 to 5. He understood that he needed to practice casting multiple spells simultaneously, because with NEAs, he had only gotten lucky. Recalling the earlier events, his familiarity with the terrain, the weak guards, and his carelessness. All these conditions made NEAs lower his guard, which cost him his life. His eyes narrowed slightly in self-reproach, and his hand, clenched by his side, trembled. "Otherwise, I would have taken." Isaac lay flat on the bed. Before he died, Jonas had told him many things, among them about the enemies of the Von Goethe house. They were all optimized to deal with mages. He closed his eyes and told himself, "There won't be any more luck like with NEAs. I need to become stronger to protect Von Goethe." The next morning, a loud call woke him up. Isaac sat up. "What's wrong?" Lily and Hans entered. "It's morning. Please wake up." She signaled to Hans, the young master's clothes. He turned to get them. "Yes." He put his feet on the floor and asked, "Why so sudden? Why are you doing this?" Lily brought a basin of water. "What do you mean?" she announced with a smile. "The master is home." Hearing that, he couldn't help but be startled, and Isaac's heart pounded a few beats. Outside the city gate, Von Goethe rode in on horseback. Thinking of that, he asked distractedly, "Father is back?" Returning to a moment in his previous life, the marks on the wooden wall were used to mark the passing days. In the dark room, a young man with long, light-colored hair was sitting at a writing desk. He used a quill to record mysterious lines of text in his diary. The door suddenly opened, and the Count walked in, holding a greatsword. The owner of the house turned his eyes toward the desk in surprise, realizing his son's unexpected presence. The knight observed the person in the room with a look of surprise mixed with suspicion. His son, Isaac, stood silently facing his father in the middle of the room, creating an atmosphere that was suffocatingly tense. Isaac looked down at his father's boots, while a few wood chips and leaves fell onto the floor. When the Count helped his son in the dark room, carefully cutting his silver hair, the father said that if this was truly what he wanted, he would respect that choice without hesitation, not even for a second. He continued in a sad voice that he could ensure everything would end peacefully and painlessly. A more mature Isaac, with wrinkles on his face, was observing the scene with tired, pained eyes. The Count continued to cut his son's long hair carefully, while the boy remained absolutely silent. The father asked one last time if this was what he truly wanted, and the young man firmly confirmed it. The Count hugged his son, moved, and said this would be the last time they saw each other. He leaned his forehead against his son's in a gesture of affection, sharing a deep farewell before leaving. The father said he would go first and wait for him, then left the room, leaving the young man alone in the darkness. He told his son to come to him without any regrets in his heart. Returning to the present, the sunlight of a beautiful day shone through the large, beautiful windows of the office in the mansion. Isaac thought to himself that this was the first time they had faced each other directly since that tragic day. The young man sat down and greeted his father, who was focused on reading important reports of the family. The Count said he had heard that recently he had helped the sick children in Black Goose Village. Isaac was surprised by the question, and his father revealed that he had heard the story from Schiller, but it was hard to believe. The boy humbly replied that he was just lucky to have found a way to cure the children. He lied that he had found a method to cure that strange pneumonia in an old book. The father tapped his fingers on the wooden table while thinking about his son's story. The Count changed the subject and asked how his physical condition had been after his recent training. Isaac replied with relief that he hadn't caused any more human explosions, and the doctor they invited was indeed very talented. Sunlight streamed through the library's beautiful, vibrant stained glass windows, illuminating the massive office. The father and son continued their conversation calmly and peacefully in the spacious study. The Count looked at his son seriously and asked about his commanding situation and daily life at the castle. Isaac took the initiative to ask for specific news regarding the critical border fortress. The Count questioned his son's sudden interest, and the boy replied that he would have to serve there one day. The Count explained that the situation there remained unchanged, still full of monsters, dark nights, and heavy snowfall. He added that the only major news was that they had stopped at the Scorched City on their way back. The young man remembered that the Scorched City was precisely where the dangerous underground sewer system was located. The father pointed at his vial and revealed that a terrible, extremely serious incident had occurred there. He stated that a private soldier had attacked his own commander, and Isaac deduced that the traitor must have been eliminated. The Count shook his head and explained that the injured commander himself had unexpectedly requested a martial court. Isaac fell into deep thought, wondering why the commander would take such a suspicious action. Suddenly, the door opened, and the Count greeted the newcomers. Two knights entered the room, respectfully greeting the young master and praising his maturity. Isaac glanced at them with an analytical, silent gaze, tried to read their minds. One of the knights, the one wearing a headband, smiled amiably at him, completely unaware of his suspicions. The Count permitted Fickle and Randolph to enter and politely dismissed Isaac to go rest. The boy immediately obeyed his father and left the room, closing the large, intricately crafted wooden door behind him. Out in the hallway, he overheard the voice of one of the men demanding that a martial court be convened as soon as possible. The man insisted that the traitor must be swiftly eliminated to maintain military discipline. The Count thought he was rushing too much and asked Randolph if he agreed with the execution. Randolph calmly replied that he only followed direct orders from the commander-in-chief. The other man sighed and scoffed, asking if he would really say that even after the captain tore his ear off. Outside, Isaac walked down the hallway in deep thought, trying to use his bright blue eyes to uncover the two men's secrets, analyzing the situation and knowing that a border secret was involved. He remembered that the insignia on their uniforms indicated they were border guards. He cleverly deduced that the injured man named Randolph was the primary victim of that rebellion. Suddenly, the sound of hurried, panting footsteps on the red carpet caught the young master's attention. A servant rushed over in desperation, urgently asking him to follow him and leave this place. He frantically revealed that an extremely urgent situation had just occurred inside the castle. The young master followed the servant through the outermost and remote areas of the massive stone castle. The protagonist asked what was so urgent, and when the servant mentioned hearing rumors of human trafficking in the sewer system, the boy replied that he already knew. Bill revealed that several people had taken bribes to turn a blind eye to the entire case. With an extremely serious expression, the young master immediately asked who the culprit was. The servant broke into a sweat from anxiety, hesitating to reveal the identities of those involved in the conspiracy. He said the guilty parties were none other than the Winterband Knights, leaving the boy utterly astonished. The servant added that the body of one of their allies had recently been found at the sewer entrance. He said all the victims' body parts had been severed, leaving only the pinky finger of the left hand. The young master asked what happened next, and the servant looked highly hesitant. He confessed that a terrifying event had occurred early this morning. He frantically explained that when he woke up, he mysteriously found that very severed finger lying on his bed. The enemy had sent a warning message directly through one of his subordinates. The threat made it clear that if the money wasn't prepared within 2 days, things would get much worse. The servant panicked, realizing his finger would be the next one cut off if he failed. He begged for help and blamed the boy for shoving him into that dangerous leadership position. The young master maintained a calm expression while coldly analyzing the gravity of the entire situation. He asked if anyone had witnessed the attack, and the servant replied that there was one witness. The witness recounted that a flash of a blade appeared before their eyes, and everything was over in the blink of an eye. The only remarkable detail they could remember was that the attacker had bandages wrapped around his head. The boy narrowed his bright blue eyes as he recognized that highly distinct physical characteristic. He simply said calmly that he understood the situation, which angered the servant because of his cold attitude. The young master began to walk slowly, calmly telling the servant not to worry. He asserted with absolute confidence that this man would not die, and that he would protect his life. He recalled that his father had returned with 2 knights who were demanding a martial court. On their way back, they had stopped near the sewers and eliminated a criminal to make an example of him. The physical traits described by the witness matched that border knight perfectly. The young master gritted his teeth in sheer fury upon realizing the arrogance and betrayal of his own guards. He walked with firm, indignant steps, dwelling on the hypocrisy of those who called themselves border knights. He concluded that if everything was true, they were nothing short of a cancer that needed to be excised from the kingdom. The young master approached the dungeon area, his footsteps instantly drawing the attention of the guard on duty. The guard was quite surprised and asked what brought the young heir all the way down to the depths of the dungeon. He asked directly about the prisoner who had been sentenced to death for rebellion. In one of the darkest cells, the criminal waited, shackled by his terrible final fate. The young master firmly declared that he had only come to speak with the prisoner. The shackled man opened his eyes, revealing a sharp, terrifying gaze in the darkness. The boy revealed that his purpose here was to confirm whether the knights were truly involved with the bandits. Standing before the bars, he asked directly if the man knew about Naya's notorious criminal organization. He added that he had heard about their involvement in the horrific human trafficking. Hearing this, the prisoner reacted instantly, clenching both fists with staggering strength. He glared at the young master with an extremely dark, hostile gaze. Maintaining absolute silence in the cell, the young master closely observed the prisoner's appearance and felt his face looked rather familiar. He asked if he knew about the mysterious connection between the city's sewer system and his military commander. The shackled man merely pressed his lips tight, refusing to answer the boy's questions. He violently rattled his heavy iron chains and coldly warned that he would only say this once. Suddenly, he lunged forward and gripped the bars tightly, startling the young master standing right in front of him. The prisoner roared in anger that he knew nothing and demanded the boy get the hell out of there immediately. The boy continued to face his wrath with absolute calmness, showing no fear or hesitation. Ignoring the shouting, the young master calmly asked what this rebel prisoner's real name was. He replied, "His name is Carlson," and the boy smiled upon hearing this vital piece of information. The young master finally recalled his face, then asked if he wanted to keep lying, calling him Cullah. The prisoner's eyes widened in sheer terror as he realized his real name had been discovered. He backed away in surprise, causing the heavy iron chains to clank together in the dark cell. The rebel stared at the boy in profound shock and asked how he could possibly know that secret name. The young man recalled that he had learned this name when the kingdom's bloody civil war was at its peak. That whole horrific power struggle had begun with the official throne succession ceremony. On that occasion, the second prince was defeated and decided to betray his homeland, conspiring with the empire to seize power. This terrible betrayal ultimately triggered a bloody clash right in the middle of the celebration ceremony. As the kingdom collapsed, the people rose up and started a rebellion led by Kyle himself during the Civil War. Now he was pretending to be someone else and desperately asked how a child could know so many royal secrets. The boy replied in an extremely calm voice that he had simply read that whole astounding story in a history book. The book recorded detailed accounts accompanied by beautiful illustrations of the lives of many notorious criminals on the continent. The work described the young leader as a military genius destined to become the world's seventh sword master. Facing him directly, the young master realized that the description of his talent was entirely accurate. The prisoner exuded an impressive amount of mana, thanks to his rigorous training. He swallowed hard, trying to imagine the destructive power this warrior would possess once he truly awakened. In his past life, the rebel had escaped punishment, and now he angrily demanded that the young man tell him how he knew all of that. The boy told him to calm down and revealed that he also knew he was the legitimate son of a legendary warrior. The warrior began to tremble with tension and whispered, asking who this boy really was. Isaac asked how he could serve in the army without recognizing the eldest son of the clan ruling this place. The prisoner asked if he had come to finish him off, but the boy said he had no interest in the life of a mediocre mercenary. He added that he was also not interested in a deserter who had vanished from the map for over 10 consecutive years. The man doubted the speaker's identity, but Isaac told him he only wanted an answer to one single serious question. With an extremely solemn expression, the young master prepared to extract the crucial information he craved. He asked why the border commander was directly involved in the human trafficking ring. Christie looked at the burning candle and said that if he was the young master, he should already know what was going on there. He stepped forward, his chains clanking, and said, "That is the biggest reason why I won't say anything." The young master crossed his arms in thought, fully understanding the man's intense reluctance to cooperate with the investigation. He warned that the commander would pin all the blame on him and turn him into a wanted criminal. He coldly concluded that if he allowed that, the prisoner would never fulfill his plan for revenge. The word revenge made the prisoner's shackled hands tremble instantly with hatred. He fell completely silent, and the two continued to look at each other in a heavy, tense silence inside the castle dungeon. The boy decided to turn away, realizing that this man would not be as easily manipulated as the servant Bill. He left the dungeon corridor, knowing that this time he needed to act in a completely different way. The young master concluded that the only viable option at this point was to bait the traitorous knight out himself. A few drops of water began to fall, echoing softly against the damp walls of the sewer. Two figures clad in dark cloaks moved stealthily through the long, abandoned tunnel. One of the intruders found it very strange that there wasn't any trace of the Nuz gang's henchmen around. The hooded man pointed his index finger forward, implying something unusual at the end of the corridor. He was surprised to discover that all the iron cells that once held the kidnapped slaves were completely empty. They complained about the delayed bribes and being suddenly summoned to this meeting by the old bandit leader. The intruder opened a large, crude door, wondering if the new bandit leader intended to break the deal with. Stepping through the entrance, the two criminals immediately stopped and gasped in astonishment. The servant Bill was forcing a strained smile, trembling as he tried to hide his utter panic. Shaking like a leaf from extreme fear, he gestured with his hands and politely invited the two guests inside. One of the disguised knights instantly grew suspicious upon seeing one of Nir's henchmen dressed like a servant from a mansion. He noticed the man was unarmed, but also observed that the servant's legs wouldn't stop shaking from anxiety. The two criminals exchanged a quick, silent, complicit glance, deciding to venture deeper into the dark room. They drew the sharp swords hidden beneath their cloaks and stepped fully into the secret lair. The hooded knight entered the dark room with a cold gaze, trying to determine who was lurking in the shadows. In front of them, a mysterious figure sat with crossed arms at the head of a large wooden table. He mockingly asked if there was the new boss of Nars who had summoned them without any proper hospitality. The man threatened, "The fake leader must think he has 9 lives to dare treat us like this." The mysterious figure asked just a single question, completely paralyzing the 2 intruders with shock. They instantly became highly alert upon realizing that the calm voice belonged to a child. His face was illuminated by candlelight. The boy calmly asked why they were acting so violent. One of the 2 knights began to break out in a cold sweat under his hood as he clearly recognized the person sitting before him. Suddenly, one of them fell to his knees on the floor, leaving his companion standing beside him utterly bewildered. The soldier questioned the action, but the kneeling warrior yelled in desperation, ordering him to get down on his knees. He asked his comrade if he was an idiot for not recognizing the great and important status of the young man present. The knight bowed in absolute submission, declaring it a great honor to meet him again in this place. The young master stood up calmly with a smirk and asked if they wanted something to drink. By calling them by their true names, the young master made Sir Fickle and Sir Randolph tremble in absolute terror in the darkness. It all started a bit earlier in an isolated cabin in the middle of a frozen forest. Inside, a man excitedly held a bag full of gold they had just acquired. He praised the skills of the deceased Nears in making money so easily. The other man held a gold coin in his hand, delighted that this amount was enough to buy food and firewood for the whole month. Hearing this, his comrade said they could even replace his old sword and still have money left over. He began tossing the gold coins to his partner while laughing out loud at their luck tonight. But their joy didn't last long as heavy footsteps and a mysterious boot appeared at the entrance. A voice from the shadows ordered them to stop immediately, startling the 2 criminals. Kyle appeared before them, revealing that he had just overheard the entire conversation about the money. The man panicked, desperately trying to hide the bag of money on the table. With a threatening glare, Kyle asked exactly what they thought they were doing. Returning to the present, Isaac calmly sipped his tea while listening to the explanation from the 2 guards. Sitting at the head of the table, the young master acknowledged that they did indeed have their reasons. He said his father was an extremely strict man who only acted as the shield of the North. They admired his honor, but they couldn't just sit idly by and watch their soldiers starve. Having no other choice, they decided to extort the bandits to make up for the resource shortage and protect the land. Fickle agreed enthusiastically, saying that was exactly their plan from the start. The young master listened to everything with closed eyes, preparing to deliver his final verdict. He opened his sharp blue eyes and coldly sentenced Sir Fickle and Sir Randolph to utter despair. Isaac declared that the punishment for their crimes was certain death. He warned that they would be turned over to the martial court, as his father would deliver the exact same verdict. Fickle lost his patience, slamming the table and asking if the boy truly didn't understand their pain. The soldier glared back furiously and concluded that a brat like him would never understand their suffering. He asked Isaac if he had ever felt extreme hunger or witnessed his comrades fall in the freezing cold without proper weapons. The young master looked at him expressionlessly and replied very bluntly that he had never experienced that. Isaac stood up and said Fickle was merely making hollow excuses for his mistakes. The young master questioned them about kidnapping civilians, and Fickle quickly blamed Nears for acting alone. The boy still looked at the 2 traffickers with an extremely strict and overwhelming gaze. Isaac asked if he truly believed he hadn't crossed the same unforgivable line as the bandits. Fickle went completely ballistic upon realizing the young master would show them absolutely no mercy. He clenched his fists in sheer rage, realizing how foolish he had been to expect sympathy from this boy. The traitor ordered Randolph to get up so they could fight like true swords of Gerda. With a ferocious look, Fickle drew his metal sword, ready to eliminate the young master on the spot. He pointed the sharp tip of his blade at Isaac, swearing to cut down anyone who stood in his way. Randolph panicked at his partner's frenzied attitude and begged him to reconsider. Fickle replied that the commander still had another young master, and they had to eliminate this threat immediately. As the tense atmosphere enveloped the room, the boy continued to observe their reactions coldly. Right then, Randolph drew his sword, and a powerful surge of blue spiritual energy began to surround the blade. The knight stepped forward with heavy strides, channeling his aura through his boots. The young master tracked the soldier's movements, seemingly a bit curious about the situation. Fickle smiled, believing his comrade had finally decided to help him eliminate the boy. He focused all his attention on attacking Isaac, completely unexpected of what his ally was about to do. Randolph looked at his old friend with deep sadness, wondering how things had come to this. He reminisced that in the beginning, all of their actions were truly for the sake of Gerda. But he realized the path they were walking had become far too dark. Hesitating to use his blade, the soldier bowed his head, wondering if they could even call this loyalty anymore. Randolph bit his lip hard as he made an extremely difficult decision regarding their fate. He stood up to face his friend and asked if he still remembered the oath they had made before. The man recalled the covenant. If one was the sword, the other would be the shield. Randolph remembered Carlson's advice that a perfect sword capable of cutting through everything without breaking was a masterpiece. But he understood that the situation had completely changed once the warrior strayed from his original path. He warned that if this masterpiece developed a will of its own, it would ultimately become a vicious, terrifying sword. Fickle was completely shocked to be stopped by his ally and asked what the hell he thought he was doing. The two brothers-in-arms began exchanging fierce blows as their blades collided violently. Randolph confessed that he could only make sense of the painful truth. After losing an ear, he shouted at Fickle that the prisoner Carlson was absolutely right about the rot consuming them. Fickle broke into a cold sweat upon realizing his comrade in arms, with whom he had weathered countless battles, had truly turned against him. He tried to persuade Randolph to stop this madness, warning him that the heir would take his life. Randolph replied firmly that if that happened, it would only be a tragedy they brought upon themselves. He decided to speak clearly once and for all, threw the harshest truths into his former partner's face. During the fierce confrontation, he slapped Fickle with the truth that the money was never just for the soldiers. He asked if the traitor really spent all that massive fortune just because he cared about the prosperity of the territory. The fight ended brutally, and silence returned to the room after the decisive blow. Returning to the dungeon, Randolph explained to Isaac that this was why Carlson decided to act in the past. That night revealed they only intended to silence the prisoner, but ended up being defeated by him instead. Isaac listened to it all calmly and contemptuously concluded that they were simply inferior to that warrior. The soldier admitted that Carlson could have easily finished them off right then if he wanted to. Instead, he just cut off Randolph's ear as a lesson and voluntarily let himself be captured without resistance. Folding his arms, Isaac asked if he avoided Carlson's punishment just because he felt guilty. Randolph bowed his head sadly and remained completely silent. Facing this truth, he trembled with anxiety and confessed in a low voice that he was extremely worried about the future awaiting him. The man wondered what would happen to his beloved family if this entire story of betrayal was exposed. Isaac looked at him seriously and said that a knight should understand the consequences better than anyone. Randolph shook with panic at the boy's coldness and felt the terrible weight of his past choices. In the corner of the room, the servant Bill was carrying a bag containing Fickle's body and desperately thinking of a way to escape. Isaac kept his eyes fixed on the prisoner and began strategizing to handle the situation. He called Sir Randolph with an authoritative tone that immediately grabbed the knight's attention. The heir asked straight out if he was willing to atone for his serious crimes in another way. With the knight's acceptance, the official story of the incident began to be rewritten by the young lord. The new version clearly stated that Randolph and Fickle only dealt with Nears to get emergency supplies for the army. The report indicated that Fickle acted alone out of greed, leading a smuggling ring and kidnapping maids from the estate. It also noted that when the plan failed, the traitor tried to sell Isaac to foreigners and used the boy as a hostage, but the vicious plot was prevented in time thanks to the heroic actions of the special figure. The official report declared that the loyal knight Randolph was the one who saved the heir and stopped the criminal. As a result, all the terrible crimes were laid squarely on the shoulders of the deceased Fickle. The traitor's body was put on public display in the town square in front of the citizens as a warning to everyone. Draped in a dark cloak covering his face, Randolph witnessed the punishment for his former associate. The knight walked quietly through the village streets under the watchful eyes of the surrounding people. Afterward, Isaac met his father in the luxurious and majestic parlor of the Go family estate. While drinking hot tea, the boy thought that the severe lack of resources was the true cause of the betrayal. The terrible shortage of basic necessities was the harsh and cruel reality that the Go family faced every day. They protected the northern border and received annual taxes from the royal family, which was their main source of income. However, the big problem was that this royal tax had been dropping significantly year by year. Even so, the Go family could not complain to the king, nor could they get rich independently. All this misery occurred due to the actions of Zeke von Go, the mad mage who burned down the imperial capital in the past. The ancestors' cursed legacy destroyed the family's reputation and glory forever. Since no one could defeat the mad mage, the king submitted to the emperor, and Zeke was eventually killed by a knight. Afterward, the kingdom became a vassal state, and the Go family lost their duke title, left only with the rank of count. Exiled to the barren north, any attempt to accumulate wealth would be viewed with extreme suspicion. The royal family would see it as treason, making the maintenance of the current system the safest way to survive. However, Isaac thought calmly that this hasty conclusion might be a huge mistake on their part. The boy warned his father and the advisors that this outdated way of thinking was just an assumption without basis. The Count's eyes widened in surprise as he realized the boldness and great wisdom behind his son's words. Isaac explained that the kingdom's finances were weakening every year and the shield tax would continue to drop accordingly. He asked if the king was truly suspicious or simply relieved to see the Go family being self-sufficient. The heir decided to be blunt and expose the clearest truth regarding the territory's real financial problems. Isaac asserted that the real barrier was never the royal ban, but the fact that they had never found a solution. Isaac reminded them that they were completely surrounded by barren lands and dangerous hostile forces. The Count pondered deeply over the opinions his son provided, resting his chin on his hand. He admitted that the boy's ideas had merit, but demanded that he bring something concrete to resolve the crisis. The family head clasped his hands together and warned that such a proposal was only valuable when accompanied by a viable plan of action. With a sharp gaze, he asked straight out if the boy had the ability to provide this saving answer. Isaac maintained a steady posture, his bright blue eyes showing that he knew exactly what he had to do. The heir reached out his hand and declared with absolute confidence that they must begin acting without further delay. The boy revealed that the first important turning point was to decisively cut all ties with the old church. He explained that the church's rigid dogmas were preventing the family from prospering and creating real wealth. The Count tensed up at the bold proposal and warned that the Vatican would not sit idly by and accept this rebellion. The boy clenched his fist with determination and agreed that that was exactly why they needed a perfect excuse. Isaac flashed a cunning smile and assured them that he already had the ideal method to create an indisputable excuse. Facing that impressive revelation, the Count turned to Schiller, seeking wise counsel. The head butler took a sip of tea and wondered if all those brilliant ideas really came from Isaac's mind. Schiller praised the boy with admiration, saying it was hard to believe he possessed so much wisdom while still struggling with his mana. Impressed by the turn of events, the Count rose from his armchair to observe his son's next moves. Through the estate window, he watched Isaac calmly strolling in the garden with his new allies. The boy walked with Kyle while discussing preparations aimed at permanently weakening the church's influence. The Count viewed the scene from afar with a contemplative gaze. Proud of his heir's early maturity, he placed his hand on the cold glass while thinking of the bright destiny awaiting the family. Schiller maintained his usual elegant composure while observing his master's silent thoughts. The conversation between father and son ended, leaving in the air the belief that big changes were about to happen. A few days later, south of the Scorched City, a mysterious carriage was driving on the road toward church. The vehicle stopped abruptly in front of the ancient temple, while a hooded figure was patiently waiting. A man in a dark cloak holding a bright lantern stepped out to welcome the guests from the carriage. In a gloomy tone, the hooded figure spoke the secret password to start the forbidden negotiation. The carriage driver slowly stepped down, remaining highly vigilant upon hearing the cult ally's password. The guest responded with the second part of the chilling password, confirming their identity for the secret meeting. The lantern-bearer nodded in agreement upon realizing he was working with the right part. He ordered the promised goods to be brought immediately to begin the terrifying dark ritual. Two hooded figures dragged a silver-haired boy who was tightly bound from the carriage. The boy was shoved hard by the henchmen, unable to resist because his hands were tied with rope. The leader asked if this weak boy was truly the noble tribute they had promised for the ritual. He brought the lantern close to the hostage's face to verify the victim's identity himself. The man wore a twisted, horrifying smile while enjoying the victory of the cruel kidnapper. The fair-haired boy was gagged and silent, showing no signs of panic in front of the cultists. The kidnapper ordered the servant to bring out the real, precious reward that the deal had promised. He arrogantly ensured that the fearsome fire goddess would open her arms to welcome this noble tribute. The group began to lead the young victim deep into the dark temple, where they would conduct the ritual. An old woman in a dark cloak greeted the group and said that everything was proceeding according to the goddess's will. Afterward, she turned back and used a mysterious tone to request that everyone follow her inside the ancient temple. Bill, disguised as the carriage driver, whispered in disgust about the dark cult they were about to enter. He quickly adjusted his voice and commanded the group in a low tone to keep moving forward without hesitation. Kyle and Randolph followed right behind the kidnappers, escorting young Isaac, who was pretending to be tied up with rope. The old woman held the bright lantern high to illuminate the dark path, and once again requested that everyone follow. The group went down the dark and damp stone stairs leading straight into the fanatic's basement. To maintain the cover in front of the cultists, Randolph placed a firm and authoritative hand on Isaac's shoulder. Cullough walked while keeping his cold, focused gaze under his hood, completely ready for any danger. He observed everything around him with extreme attention, knowing that even a small mistake could put everyone's life at risk. Flashing back a few days ago, during a private conversation when a cup of hot tea was served, Kyle asked if he was released due to exposing the knight's crimes, and Isaac confirmed that was the plan. The heir explained that rebellion is a heavy crime, so the warrior had lost his leadership position. Kyle replied calmly that he didn't even know he had held such an important position in the army. He paused for a moment before bringing the teacup to his lips. Intrigued by the boy's next words, Isaac smiled and asked him if he recognized this type of tea, revealing that the drink originated from his own homeland. The warrior looked at the teacup in surprise when realizing the young heir knew his true foreign roots. Cullough set the teacup down on the table and asked directly why he hadn't reported him to the officials. He reminded the heir that the boy knew very well his real name wasn't Carlson. Isaac confessed that he needed to keep this secret to be able to use his talent at the right moment. Kyle began to break into a cold sweat at that revelation. Unable to understand what the boy was planning, the heir advised the man to focus on his own goal. Instead of trying to guess others' thoughts, he asked if Kyle was aiming for the life of the greedy old man who destroyed the family he was trying to build. Isaac revealed the target's name was Vic Countlaus von Botmare, leaving the warrior completely shocked. Kyle asked in horror how the boy knew about this and why he wasn't stopping him from seeking revenge. The warrior explained that his target was an important nobleman in this kingdom, while he was just a foreigner. Isaac revealed that what he truly needed was a perfect sword possessing its own steel will. He promised that if the man lent his legendary strength, he would ensure the desired revenge would be carried out. Kyle looked into space in silence, realizing this was a partnership offer he couldn't refuse. Back in the Scorched City, a priest was screaming in the middle of the street to attract the attention of all the citizens. The fanatic roared at the top of his lungs about the horrific threats plaguing the region. He warned that dark magic was spreading like a plague, and the cultists were committing unforgivable, cruel acts. The priest ordered everyone to seek salvation in faith, and not in the feudal lord who just stood by and did nothing. Inside the carriage passing through the area, Kyle observed the man and commented on the old church's fanatics. Randolph complained that the church taxed the family heavily, but continued to smear Lord Gothia in public. Isaac interrupted the two allies' discussion, saying that this topic was not the most important one right now. Randolph asked nervously if the heir was completely sure about being the bait for the ritual. The heir explained that the fanatics sought fame and there was no bait more attractive than him in the north. Kyle warned that they didn't know what deadly dangers were waiting inside the fanatics' den. Randolph emphasized the horrific rumors about brutal rituals and asked if it was really worth risking their lives. Isaac ignored the warnings and asked if the old church was actually providing funding for this dark cult. The boy's blue eyes flashed with determination as he analyzed the details of the plot in his mind. Kyle commented that the money they used to bribe the guards came directly from the cursed cult's treasury. The heir agreed and confirmed this was the official version they would present to the kingdom. Isaac recalled that the near-perfect quality coins were minted by the royal family, something a bandit couldn't have. Randolph agreed that the origin of those gold coins was very suspicious and showed the presence of a powerful ally. Kyle speculated that only the old church could access this type, but doubted whether this proved a direct connection to the cult. He wondered if the heir was really planning to cling to such a slim and meaningless hope. The protagonist recalled that also around this time, the situation began to spiral into chaos throughout the Northern Territory. The dark cult began destroying the land from within with bizarre rituals that left the citizens paralyzed with fear. The old church was the biggest beneficiary of the spreading terror, pretending to hunt down members of the secret cult. They arrested believers and burned them publicly at the stakes in the middle of the village square. Witnessing this fake divine mercy, the people began to worship the church even more. From then on, the situation for the Go family became unsustainable, and the nobles began complaining about the horrific absurdity. They grumbled that the church had doubled the tithe and even demanded soldiers to build while they were struggling to survive. The territory began to suffer under financial pressure and heavier demands from the old church. Therefore, the territorial lord had to endure extreme starvation, and Isaac decided it was time to decisively break the pact with them. This brave attitude was just the first step to being able to protect the people and the Go territory. Back in the dark dungeon, the old woman slowly walked down the stone stairs while leaning on an old cane. The old woman said that everything started from here when the church burned this place down, and only 3 saints survived the Great Fire. She said the wounded survivors saw God face to face, but Bill just wished she would shut up for once. The woman continued her bizarre lecture, declaring that the human soul resides right in human flesh. She explained that eating this flesh would cause the soul to be reborn in them with all the wisdom and vitality of the sacrificed person. At that moment, they witnessed many believers eating the forbidden parts of the body in a gruesome feast to achieve eternity. Bill was horrified to the extreme while witnessing the disgusting and barbaric acts happening right before his eyes. The old woman smashed her cane on the ground and shouted that the prophesied tribute had finally arrived at the altar. The fanatics became excited on the floor as she ordered them to eat the flesh to become noble and pure like the victim. With a horrifying smile, the old woman introduced Isaac as the perfect soul possessing all the qualities for the feast. She opened her mouth grotesquely and ordered everyone to start eating the boy on the spot without a shred of mercy. Bill lost his patience, kicked the old woman away, and said he couldn't listen to any more of this meaningless nonsense. He roared in frustration, asking Isaac how much more bizarre madness they had to endure in this den. The knight stepped forward and began untying the ropes, which are just fake, binding the heir to start the fight. Isaac removed the gag and breathed a sigh of relief when seeing Bill finally act as he expected. The heir calmly ordered his allies to only engage with the fanatics who attacked them first. The fanatics backed away in fear when realizing those victims were actually ruthless warriors. Isaac seriously warned his associates not to forget the true strategic plan that brought them to this place. The old woman lying on the ground screamed in hatred, promising that a terrible curse from the goddess would befall the intruders. Randolph interrupted her with a precise strike to the face to extinguish that annoying screaming forever. The knight pointed his sharp weapon outward and warned the other fanatics that anyone who dared to step forward would be eliminated immediately. He guaranteed with a terrifying gaze that he would take down any opponent before they could even feel pain. Hearing that horrific threat, most of the cultists panicked and fled, trying to escape the place. Randolph was a bit surprised to see the whole gang desperately running away through the dark dungeon corridors. The henchmen ran so fast that in just a few seconds, The temple entrance was completely empty and silent. Kyle asked if they should chase the ones running away, but Isaac replied that the priority now was to search the entire area. Randolph sighed tiredly and concluded that these crazy fanatics were nothing more than a chaotic joke. Kyle knelt beside the fainted old woman on the floor and asked her calmly if she could stand up by herself. The old woman woke up in a daze, asking where she was and begging not to be hit, making Kyle curious about her reaction. Randolph sarcastically asked if she had suddenly aged and commented satirically on the old woman's mental state. The old woman begged for forgiveness, mistaking Isaac for a deacon, but the boy just called her mother in a friendly way. The heir leaned down patiently with a gentle smile and asked where the old woman's real home was. A moment later, the group arrived at a humble wooden cabin located in the slums south of the scorched city. As they entered the house and looked up at the attic, the knights were stunned at what they had just discovered. Before them was a chest filled with a large pile of high-quality, sparkling money. They couldn't believe that such a poor and humble old woman was hiding a massive fortune in the attic. Randolph pushed his greedy companion aside and asked if they were sure this money belonged to the royal family. Isaac nodded firmly, confirming that his loyal knight Randolph's suspicions were correct. The boy analyzed the coins very carefully and asserted that the official seal engraved on the metal belonged to the royal mint. He was glad they had obtained evidence linking the cult to the church, but was interrupted by a knock on the door and a voice calling out. Suddenly, the cabin door opened, and someone announced loudly that they were entering the humble room. The newcomer's voice echoed throughout the house as he kindly inquired about the old woman's condition. In the attic, Isaac's eyes widened in astonishment when he realized whose voice it was. The boy immediately recognized the person who had just entered as an influential clergyman from the old church. With a discreet smile on his face, the man asked in a friendly tone whether the ritual had been a great success. Sitting on the bed, the old woman broke into a cold sweat and hesitated to answer the man before her. Trying to hide her extreme panic, she trembled all over and tried to mutter a few incoherent sentences to distract the visitor's attention. With terrified eyes, she stammered in fear and claimed that demons had invaded the temple and destroyed everything. The woman loudly revealed that ruthless creatures had desecrated the sacred altar and wiped out all the cult's followers. In a panic, she begged for a divine miracle, while the clergyman grew confused and demanded a clear explanation about the demons. Barely able to breathe, she tried to feign madness by calling the man a deacon and making up an absurd story about the room. The old woman sobbed on the bed, saying her husband was beating her and desperately begging for help. The clergyman sighed impatiently at the scene, deducing that the old woman had completely lost her mind. However, a slight sound of wood from the attic caught the man's attention and made him instantly alert. He spun around sharply, his suspicious gaze directed toward the wooden stairs leading up to the attic. The clergyman stared at the top of the stairs in the darkness, suspecting that someone was hiding up there. The man gathered magical energy in his hands and coldly warned that he had sensed the presence of an intruder in the house. He concluded in his thoughts that the old woman was no longer useful and that their secrets must not be revealed. Therefore, he intended to incinerate the evidence of corruption along with all the accumulated assets in that filthy attic. Kyle watched the threat from above and warned that true demons often hide behind a facade of holy light. In the blink of an eye, Kyle appeared behind the clergyman with a sharp blade pressed against the traitor's neck. Trembling and sweating in terror, the clergyman tried to threaten the warrior, warning that the Vatican would avenge his death. Isaac began slowly descending the wooden stairs, commenting that he had finally remembered the man's identity. The young lord smirked and greeted the traitor sarcastically as he approached in the living room. Time shifted to the next morning at the majestic cathedral in the city, where the deacon appeared bound and captured. Tied tightly to a wooden chair with heavy rope, the corrupt clergyman had no way to escape. Weeping in despair, the prisoner began to confess that the old church wanted to expand its influence within the territory. He revealed that to achieve this goal, the bishop had ordered them to create a fictional villain to frighten the populace. Consequently, the man had created a new doctrine and incited poor wanderers to establish that terrifying cult. The deacon bitterly admitted that this very plot had birthed the horrific cult that once terrorized the land. Randolph commented indignantly that this was the worst confession he had ever heard and asked what they would do next. Isaac maintained a cold and contemplative expression. Knowing that this confession was the card he needed for his chess game, the boy decided that his advisor, Schiller, would take the prisoner to the Grand Cathedral to begin formal negotiations. The bound clergyman spat on the ground and laughed loudly, saying that the bishop would surely punish the Go family severely. Not letting him speak further, Isaac admitted that it was he who had orchestrated this plan, so if they wanted to collect a debt, they could just tell him to come here and find him. This left the fat man completely stunned. Night fell over the territory. In the silent dungeon, a lonely candle burned, casting flickering shadows on the cold stone wall. The monk kept tapping his feet on the ground in restlessness. The bound clergyman broke into a cold sweat, thinking his entire plan had collapsed in a single night because of a child. Suddenly, an unbearable stabbing pain pierced the deacon's chest, causing him to groan in extreme agony. The man sneered grotesquely and mocked that the young lord was just a descendant of savages. The prisoner assured him that divine justice would descend upon Isaac's sins before he took his last breath. He felt his strength waning as he rambled that the bishop would surely bring a fitting punishment upon the boy. With eyes full of madness and hatred, the man used his last bit of strength to curse the entire Go bloodline. The clergyman stared at the stab wound on his chest in disbelief. Unable to believe his time was up, he groaned in pain one last time as the mysterious hooded attacker turned and leaped away. The mysterious figure who had eliminated the deacon stepped out of the dungeon with cold, silent footsteps. However, heavy footsteps blocked his path of escape, and a firm voice asked if the intruder was already planning to leave. Isaac appeared imposingly at the dungeon entrance, holding a bright lantern to block the attacker's path. The hooded figure stopped instantly upon realizing he had fallen into the boy's perfect trap. Isaac smiled coldly in the darkness, commenting that it was a pity they had to meet in such a tragic way. The young lord revealed the hooded man's true identity, calling the man Bishop Lab. At the same time, the outside of the building had been surrounded by a group of soldiers. Not far away, Kyle and Randolph were hiding in the treetops, observing everything. They conversed with each other. If the young lord guessed correctly, they are from the old church, right? Exactly. Seeing that the situation wasn't going their way, they immediately came to silence the witnesses. I didn't expect the young lord to guess so accurately. Randolph looked toward the group, his eyes slightly contemplative, muttering, "The old church. They made a fortune from Nears. Yet neither I nor Fickle knew anything about it." Wait, that's not quite right. It's not that we didn't know. We knew very well it was dirty money, but we turned a blind eye and didn't ask any questions. Kyle glanced at him once. Then he stood up and said, "Now that you know, don't end up like Fickle. You still have a family to protect." These words seemed to awaken Randolph. His hands clenched in determination. Seeing this, Kyle also nodded in satisfaction. Focus on the mission. There are 13 of them in total. Clean them all up. Don't let anyone get in the young lord's way. Having said that, they drew the sharp swords at their waists. Back inside the room, Lavin's cold voice also rang out. "You don't seem surprised to see me. Or was a Marquis's son born special?" He said while maintaining his familiar, compassionate smile. But at that very moment, Isaac's eyes widened. An attack lunged straight at him. Fortunately, Isaac dodged at the last possible second. It turned out the attack aimed at Isaac was a wooden stake. It was strong enough to pierce straight into the wall. Isaac immediately speculated. Is he using teleportation on the piles of stakes? Or is that power from a magic grimoire? Thinking this, he said, "I am also quite surprised. I didn't expect you to come here yourself. Why are your eyes as joyful as if you just found gold?" In response to his words, Lavin also curled his lip. "Is that so? Actually, I'm very sad as well. I didn't expect the deacon to fall into darkness so easily, but he was still grateful to me. Regardless, he still brought the seed of calamity straight to me." Having said that, the man drew another sharp stake from his waist and threw it straight at the protagonist at wind-tearing speed. Isaac's eyes remained focused. He reached his hand forward, and in that moment, Isaac grabbed the sharp stake, causing it to embed deeply into the stone floor. Lavin's face was filled with panic, as things were not going according to plan. "How can you also use ice magic?" he shouted, while Isaac only calmly said, "Who knows? Maybe I just sold my soul to the devil. Lavin's expression began to turn ugly, but then he calmed down a little. Isaac, do you remember when you were just born? I was the one who performed the purification ritual for you. I wasn't happy at all when you appeared in this world back then. Do you study history? Isaac shrugged and replied, yes, just like everyone else. Lavin stepped forward and said, then you should know that your birth was a mistake. Most of the believers here come from border tribes, barbarian savages who roam and plunder, causing trouble. Yet your father, Count Go, wanted to make peace with them. Then he married a barbarian woman and gave birth to you. That marriage went against the heavens. So it is only natural that you were born with a curse. You were never meant to exist in this world in the first place. Hearing this, Isaac's eyes revealed a hint of anger. That sounds grating, especially coming from someone who is trying to take my life. Facing him, Lavin maintained his mocking smile. Do you know that cultists often use these stakes for human sacrifice rituals? What a bunch of savages. Today, you will die at their hands. Thus, the connection between Go and the savages will end, and this land will be purified. Having said that, several other sharp stakes began flying toward Isaac. Isaac also focused his magic power into his palms. 2 sharp pieces of ice appeared in his hands. Thanks to that, the protagonist easily blocked Lavin's attack. This left Lavin looking confused, thinking to himself, this isn't ordinary ice. He hit every flying stake with absolute precision. How is that possible? This was thanks to what Isaac had trained with Lucas in his past life. After being blown away by Lucas, the protagonist panted and said, Lucas, let's stop here for today. I'm out of breath. Lucas used a teasing tone. Tired already? Isaac retorted, tired? We've been at it for almost an hour. Lucas reached out to pull Isaac up while saying, but your swordsmanship has improved. Before, you couldn't even block one of my strikes. Today you blocked 5 in a row. The protagonist shook his head slightly. It's all thanks to your excellent teaching. Why don't you register to be a knight? It's a waste of talent being with me. He smiled and replied, forget it. My swordsmanship is only average. What is truly impressive is your imagination, young lord. Back to reality, continuous attacks were launched toward Isaac. However, Isaac blocked them all. During the fight, he thought to himself, why did I suddenly remember his words? Back then, Lucas didn't explain further. But now I understand what he meant. This imagination is a product of those days being confined to the house. Because I couldn't see the outside world, my internal senses became sharp. During those long hours of daydreaming, I fought Lucas countless times. From visualizing magic I couldn't yet cast to painting a future that seemed impossible. It was those countless experiences in my mind that made me who I am today. Facing him, Lavin launched another attack. Seeing this, Isaac also waved his hand to counterattack. The 2 attacks collided in midair, creating a loud explosion. Isaac thought to himself, Lucas, you really are a great teacher. By this point, all the wooden stakes Lavin had brought were gone. However, Isaac did not lower his guard. Surely you don't only have that, right? Being a bishop and having to rely on a magic book to shoot stakes. You don't seem like a man of God at all. Hearing him say that, Lavin gritted his teeth in anger. To avoid revealing my signature technique, I held back from using divine power directly, but now I have no other choice. He threw the book in his hand to the ground, focusing magic power into his palms. Open your eyes and look. This is the divine power granted to me. Holy fire. Isaac stared upward and saw a giant blue fireball hovering in the air. However, that only made the protagonist even more confused. This is holy fire? Lavin nodded proudly. Exactly. This purifying flame is something that ordinary mages cannot replicate, even in their dreams. With it, your ice crystals will evaporate in. Before he could finish his sentence, Isaac interrupted. Are you talking about this? At that very moment, an identical fireball appeared in his palm, leaving the fat man extremely perplexed, unable to understand how. Lavin seemed unable to accept reality and demanded in a furious growl, how did you manage to create that flame? Isaac replied in a completely calm voice. Very simple. Just create fire and then compress it twice. That's all. This made Lavin feel even more incredulous. Are you mocking me? Power doesn't work that way. In response, Isaac decided to enlighten the old man. Maybe true for the old church's power, but it seems I am a heretic, because my magic is dual-element magic. That is also the only reason I can do this." As soon as he finished speaking, the flame in his hand suddenly burned more fiercely than ever before. Then it turned a deep purple. Witnessing this scene made Lavin's eyes nearly pop out of their sockets. Absurd. How can this be? There is no way such power could be granted to someone with filthy blood. Isaac extinguished the magic in his hand and said, "Oh, perhaps the gods are a bit biased toward me." Those words caused Lavin's face to stiffen completely. His hands began to tremble. "That is blasphemy. I have spent decades forging this power." Having said that, he fired the fireball in his hand straight toward Isaac at wind-tearing speed. Meanwhile, the protagonist stood still, thinking to himself, "Decades? You say that? As for me, I have practiced it my entire life." His gaze turned as cold as ice. He slowly raised his hand forward. A purple pillar of fire, even more terrifying, erupted from his fingertips. It pierced through the blue fireball and shot straight toward Lavin, causing sweat to pour like a river down his face. Isaac calmly said, "Because I pity you, Bishop, I will let you know the reason you have to die. And that reason is that the news of me knowing how to use magic spreading outside would cause a lot of trouble." Just like that, Lavin took a direct hit from the magic, and in the end, his body was burned to black charcoal. As for Isaac, he coughed a few times, panting after that horrific attack. Maintaining magic at this level for a long time was still too much for him. The person who arrived was Kyle. He was supporting Randolph, who was covered in blood. His eyes widened slightly when looking at the pile of burning charcoal ahead and asking, "What happened here?" Isaac turned to look at him with a hesitant gaze and thought to himself, "Unlike Bill, Kyle hasn't signed a contract. It's best to hide that I know how to use magic." Thinking this, he made up an excuse. The deacon and the bishop were arguing, and as you can see, they killed each other. This story left Kyle feeling slightly surprised. Is that so? Isaac was just as suspicious. Having no intention of asking anything more, he thought to himself. Meanwhile, Kyle did not ask further but reported, "I have already cleared out the holy knights outside." Isaac nodded, but then fell into contemplation and asked, "What about Randolph?" Kyle glanced at Randolph and replied, "He asked me to take care of his family." Time passed quickly. The sky was gray. Randolph's funeral was held. Even the family had attended. In another corner, Randolph's wife and 2 sons were weeping in grief. From afar, Isaac observed quietly and asked, "How did Randolph die?" "At least we should let his family know," Kyle replied. "Those holy knights were very strong, but Randolph could still have survived if I had used my full strength." Those words left Isaac silent for a moment. After a few seconds, he asked, "You mean you didn't do that?" "I had to play the role of a regular soldier until I killed that person," Kyle replied. However, this made Isaac think differently. "That means you accepted hiding until you got your revenge, even if it meant sacrificing the life of your close friend." On his side, Kyle continued to warn Isaac, "I'm telling you beforehand so the young lord can prepare yourself mentally. If later you find yourself in a similar situation, I will still act exactly the same way," he said with an extremely serious expression. Isaac turned to ask, "Even if I am the one helping you get your revenge?" Kyle confirmed once more, "That's right. The day I reveal my full power can only be that day." Isaac understood that the day he spoke of was the day he would collect his blood debt and his identity as Kyle, not Carlson. Thinking this, he just calmly said, "I understand. Both you and I are people who don't deserve to attend a proper funeral." Time continued to pass. The scene shifted to inside a carriage. At this moment, Isaac and his father were having a short conversation. His father spoke first. "The preparations for the negotiation with the Holy See are complete. In exchange for us turning a blind eye to the bishop's sins, they will no longer collect the 10% tax, and also will not send a new bishop here. However, it is unclear how long they will keep their word. But at least for now, Go has escaped from the mess of the old church, just as you calculate." Isaac nodded slightly. Inside, he felt a flicker of relief. "Good, the obstacle is cleared. It's time to prepare for the next step." For his part, Count Go continued, "The next time Carlson comes, I will properly praise him. But for now, let's talk about something else." He took a deep breath to steady himself. He clasped his hands together and admitted, "I have absolutely no idea. From just how brutal the cult's rituals were, to the fact that they brought 13 holy knights, to the fact that the bishop himself was the founder of that twisted cult to carry out such depraved acts. I was completely in the dark. While you knew everything, I was oblivious. What exactly have you been through? Before I left for Winterban, you were just a weak and rather peculiar child. But now, I can't even guess what you're thinking anymore. Isaac was also silent at this admission. After a few seconds, he spoke up. I was simply considering the interests of our family. At that moment, he seemed to revert to the old Isaac, the one who had witnessed the decline of the family. Walgo watched him quietly and said, Isaac, I married Adele when I was only 14. Back then, we didn't even speak the same language. From culture and habits to ways of thinking, we were completely worlds apart. She was a wild girl. That period was hell for both of us, because we were just tools brought out to quell the war between the two sides. But precisely because of that, Adele and I made a promise to each other that we would never turn you children into tools for the family. Although the true meaning of this life remains a mystery, we promised to help you live lives of your own. Honestly, I thought I'd have to wait for you to grow up a little more before telling you this, but I didn't expect you to mature so quickly. Looking at your face, I'm sure you're wondering why I'm telling you all this, aren't you? He reached out to pat Isaac's head and advised, it means you can absolutely live carefree and just be a normal child. Isaac silently pursed his lips and nodded in agreement. Yes. Elsewhere in the forest, a large man was rushing to report to his boss. Boss, there's a letter from Go. The bald man was startled. What letter? Give it here. Let me see. He said that, then snatched the letter and threw it straight into the fire in front of him. I'm running out of firewood for the stove. This is just right. His subordinate cried out in a panic. Wait, why are you burning it? The boss roared. Shut your mouth. That pile of scrap paper isn't worth a single coin. No matter how many times they send them, those people will never become the masters of this land. Arthur called Isaac and Carlson over, saying they had both done a great job. He summoned them to praise them for their efforts. He first turned to Carlson and asked if he had any wishes. Carlson replied that he wanted to continue serving the young Master Isaac. Arthur pointed out that if Carlson returned to Winterband, he could be promoted to squad commander. Carlson calmly replied that instead of chasing a position, he wanted to find a place where his skills could be used most effectively. Tapping his fingers on the table in thought, Arthur muttered to himself before agreeing that if that was Carlson's wish, then so be it. Turning to Isaac, Arthur remarked that he had no objections either. Isaac replied that he would feel more at ease if Carlson served as his bodyguard. Arthur accepted the request, officially appointing Carlson as Isaac's personal bodyguard and granting him 200 dinarons. Carlson thanked him respectfully. Arthur then turned to Isaac with a serious expression and said it was Isaac's turn, telling him to state what he wanted. Isaac thoughtfully replied that he wanted the lands of Fickle. Looking at him in surprise, Arthur asked if he meant Windfell. The scene shifted to a practice sword fight, where the sound of two wooden swords clashing rang out. Isaac was gradually overwhelmed, lost his balance, and fell backward. Carlson remarked that Isaac had blocked the attacks quite well, but still lacked the strength to stand firm. After wiping the sweat from his face, Carlson looked at Isaac sternly and asked why he had suddenly demanded a sparring match. Isaac replied that he intended to take over Windfeld. Carlson asked what Isaac intended to do after acquiring Windfeld. Isaac replied that Carlson didn't need to know much, just that it would help him carry out his revenge. Hearing those words, Carlson was momentarily startled. The two took their positions again. Isaac tightened his grip on the wooden sword and lunged forward with a cold gaze. In his heart, Isaac was determined that it was time to start over. As Isaac launched an attack, Carlson secretly thought with surprise that he had heard Isaac had never learned swordsmanship. Yet his sword technique was strangely graceful. Continuing the fight, Carlson silently observed that Isaac's strikes were not particularly sharp or fast, but both his offense and defense were extremely precise. While parrying Isaac's blows, Carlson thought that such a level could only be achieved if Isaac had been holding a sword since he was 5 or 6 years old. However, after being pushed back with shaking hands, he also realized Isaac's physical strength was too weak for that to be the case. Isaac tried to keep fighting even though he was nearly exhausted, but every time he fell, he struggled to stand back up. Witnessing that, Carlson wondered how something like that could happen. Carlson's gaze gradually changed. He no longer looked at Isaac as a child. Tightening his grip on the sword, he leaped into the air. Sensing danger, Isaac scrambled back, but Carlson launched a decisive blow. The two wooden swords collided with a heavy crack as Isaac trembled, defending desperately. Suddenly, Carlson intentionally loosened his grip, letting the sword slide to the side. Isaac lost his momentum, and at that very moment, Carlson delivered a powerful kick to Isaac's side. Isaac cried out in pain before falling to the side. Carlson coldly remarked that with Isaac's current level, it wasn't even enough to survive in Winfeld. Isaac protested that was exactly why he had asked Carlson to teach him. Carlson's face grew colder as he said that Isaac could use magic, couldn't he? He recalled Isaac's story about the deacon and the bishop killing each other, and concluded that the deacon actually wasn't strong enough to defeat the bishop. Isaac immediately asked how Carlson knew that. Carlson explained that when a person reaches a certain level, whether it be magic or aura, they can accurately gauge the opponent's strength. Isaac smiled faintly and asked if Carlson was really comfortable admitting he had reached that level. He added that he thought Carlson was hiding his true strength. Carlson frowned and replied that Isaac had known the truth from the moment he wiped out the Holy Knights. After hesitating for a moment, Isaac explained that since there were no prying eyes around, he could speak freely. He admitted that using magic would definitely make things easier for a while, but it would politically isolate the Goethe family because his unique physique was exactly like that of a certain 10th grade mage. Curious, Carlson asked if Isaac was talking about Zeke von Goethe. Isaac confirmed that he was. He explained that Zeke von Goethe was the only 10th grade mage in recorded history, and historical records indicated he also suffered from mana explosion. According to those records, Zeke collected magical artifacts from across the continent and wore them, seemingly overcoming his physical limitations in his own way. Isaac then asked what that meant for him personally. Carlson replied helplessly that the fact that Isaac could use magic was proof that he had also overcome that physical limit, just like Zeke von Goethe did in the past. Isaac bowed his head and urged Carlson to think about the situation. He pointed out that it had been over a century since Zeke von Goethe burned down the imperial capital. Yet, someone with the exact same physique had been born into the Goethe family again and had also overcome. Isaac asked if Carlson really believed the royal family and other noble houses would leave the Goethe family alone. In his heart, Carlson concluded that they certainly wouldn't. Instead, they would either exploit the Goethe family for political gain or assassinate Isaac. Isaac slowly stood up and asked Carlson if he regretted joining the Goethe family. Carlson nodded slightly, admitting that he did regret it, but declared that he had never looked back. He warned Isaac that the one who would truly regret it was Isaac himself, because he was the one who had asked for the spar. Isaac immediately protested in a panic that they should wait a moment, because he thought the match had ended. Isaac was sitting in the carriage. Schiller asked if it was really okay to leave Winfeld without saying anything, noting that Hans and Gisela would surely be sad. Isaac replied that Schiller wasn't usually the type to worry about such things, and asked why he was mentioning it now. Schiller replied that it was because Isaac himself cared. Without looking back, Isaac thought to himself that when he burned with the purple flame, he had felt his body could barely take any more. He admitted to himself that he still couldn't fully control the mana explosion. He then explained aloud that it was better for Hans and Gisela to be sad than for them to die, as he didn't want even the smallest possibility of them losing their lives. Elsewhere, Carlson rode his horse across the desolate wasteland. He explained that Winfeld, formerly known as Fickle Territory, had become a land polluted by monster blood, where nothing could sprout or grow. He added that this was also the first territory to face any enemy that managed to get past Winterban. Hearing this, Isaac thought to himself that this description was identical to the final state of the territory he had witnessed in his previous life. Suddenly, Isaac's eyes widened as the ground began to shake violently. Schiller shouted that a horn had sounded. It was the signal for monsters appearing. A guard outside immediately opened the carriage door and urgently warned young Master Isaac that monsters had appeared, ordering him not to go outside, but to stay inside the carriage. The moment Isaac saw the person standing outside, he was astonished and cried out in disbelief, asking why Hans was, amidst the white, snowy forest, the carriage train was plodding forward. Isaac suddenly called out to Hans. He wondered why the butler was so stubborn about following him into such a dangerous place. Hans could only sigh in silence. Isaac's eyes were full of suspicion as he stared at Hans. Hans scratched his head and explained that someone had been stalking and harassing him day and night, so he had to take refuge with the young master. Carlson snapped to attention, declaring loudly that he would protect Isaac at any cost. Isaac could only sigh in exasperation, rubbing his forehead at his subordinate's excessive enthusiasm. Suddenly, a loud noise rang out, and a giant black shadow landed on the snow right next to the carriage. Hellhounds had ambushed them. Carlson shouted immediately, ordering the guards to form a battle formation. Hideous red eyes gradually emerged from the shadows. It was a hellhound, a notorious magical beast that hunted prey in the Windfelt region. Bessemer noted that these were very intelligent. They always prioritized eliminating the weakest targets first. A powerful stomp made snow fly, blinding the whole area. Bessemer drew his sword, his eyes not leaving the enemy, preparing for the clash. He focused intensely, observing every opening of the monsters. Despite the obstruction, a giant hellhound lunged straight at Isaac's carriage. Carlson yelled a warning. Carlson and Isaac hadn't even recovered their composure before the black shadow covered their entire view. Isaac quickly grabbed Hans by the shoulder to pull him back and protect the old man. The beast's snout, filled with sharp teeth, smashed straight into the carriage cabin. A deafening crash echoed as the carriage was completely destroyed in an instant. Isaac and Hans were thrown onto the cold ground, surrounded by debris. Isaac cried out in pain. He tried to suppress the pain and crawled up from the rubble. Isaac looked around in a panic and called out Hans's name in vain. He feared losing another important person if things continued like this. Suddenly, there was a sound from under the pile of broken wood. Isaac strained his eyes to look. Hans struggled to crawl out of the rubble, his mouth still groaning from the collision. He weakly replied to Isaac that he was still there and was okay. Carlson knelt on the ground, blood dripping from a wound on his face. Isaac unexpectedly gave Carlson a punch straight to the face for getting himself injured. Stung by the punch, Carlson gave a miserable smile. He admitted that young Master Isaac's punch was truly much stronger than he had expected. Isaac clenched his fist, looking at Carlson with eyes full of reproach. Carlson froze, lowering his face, not daring to look directly at Isaac. The guard sincerely apologized for letting the young master be put in danger. Isaac breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that both Hans and Carlson were safe. He called for Carlson to stand up. Bessemer led the horses closer. Isaac asked if he had finished dealing with the magical beast from earlier. He wondered about the other monsters in the pack. Bessemer stuttered, trying to say something. Isaac heard battle cries ringing out from afar. He was curious about what was happening. Not far away, a chaotic battle was taking place. The Hellhound pack was completely overwhelmed by a group of strangers. Bessemer explained that those were the Windfelt warriors. It seemed they had finished clearing the monsters to help the convoy. Isaac froze when he realized these warriors were fighting completely shirtless. A giant Windfelt warrior swung his axe, cleanly cutting down a Hellhound that was lunging forward. The man slaughtered the monsters while laughing heartily, a terrifying, mad look on his face. Looking at the warriors bloodthirstily tearing the monsters apart, Isaac could only exclaim that they were a bunch of lunatics. A madness so incomprehensible right in the middle of this harsh land. Bessemer explained that the giant standing over there was the commander of the Windfell camp. Most of the soldiers here, including him, came from a bloodthirsty warrior tribe. Isaac heard this and could only mutter the name to himself. A shirtless giant, wielding an axe stained with monster blood, trudged toward Isaac's group. Hans hurriedly clarified that he was the family's treasurer, not any relative of this giant. Hans asked the commander if he had received a letter informing them about this trip. The commander asked blankly, "What letter?" clearly having thrown the pile of papers into the trash without even reading a word. He loomed closer, leaning down to look at Isaac inquisitively, feeling the face looked somewhat familiar. He smirked and asked Bessemer mockingly if he had just brought along a kid who was about to cry. Carlson demanded that he keep his mouth shut, but the commander was busy exclaiming that time passed too quickly, and Isaac looked very much like his mother. Isaac's face stiffened upon hearing the stranger judge him with such a flippant attitude. Isaac didn't care about what the man said. He just coldly demanded that he put on some clothes before continuing the conversation. Around them, soldiers were busy cleaning up monster carcasses and moving the injured toward the camp. Han spoke up, asserting that from now on, Isaac was the legitimate lord of this Windfelt region. The commander sat on a log, his expression indifferent, as if he didn't care much about Isaac's title of lord. He casually brought up how Isaac's mother had died tragically and remarked that he didn't look sad at all. Hans asked Isaac anxiously if he really wanted to stay in this harsh and dangerous place. The commander scratched his head, saying he still felt something was off. Suddenly, he raised his hand, pointing his rough finger straight at Isaac. He asked loudly if this was the useless child cursed by fate that everyone kept talking about. He turned to look at Bessemer to await confirmation of his suspicion. The man's eyes narrowed maliciously as he stared at the little young master. He laughed heartily, pleased that he had guessed right, a laugh filled with contempt. The giant's hand tightened on the handle of his heavy iron axe. He advised Isaac to get out of there while he was still being kind, as there was no room here to look after a stupid child. He hoisted his giant axe onto his shoulder, creating an invisible, crushing pressure on those around him. Bessemer hurriedly called out to the commander when he saw the situation starting to take a turn for the worse. A cold look, full of disdain, came from the giant toward Isaac. Isaac stood his ground, declaring that if he dared to kick him out, this camp would soon be wiped out as well. Because the Wolf King is coming, Isaac's statement seemed to freeze the surrounding atmosphere. The commander paused for a beat, looking at Isaac with an inquisitive gaze. He asked sarcastically what a wet-behind-the-ears kid like Isaac knew about warfare. His hand tightened on the axe handle, veins bulging with anger. An axe strike tore through the air, the pressure forcing Isaac to squint as the wind hit his face. The axe blade stopped just millimeters from Isaac's face. The commander roared that he had already defeated countless Wolf Kings, so Isaac better know his place and shut up. The commander's eyes blazed with anger, ready to crush anyone who dared to challenge his authority. But Isaac kept his cold blue eyes locked on him, not blinking once before the deadly axe blade. "Carlson, lower your weapon," Isaac ordered calmly, as if the blade didn't mean a thing. Only then did everyone realize in shock that Carlson had quietly appeared behind the commander and was holding a sword to his throat without anyone noticing. Carlson looked at the giant with sharp eyes, full of absolute loyalty to his master. Carlson whispered, "Understood," then slowly loosened his sword, ending a heart-stopping confrontation right in the snowy forest. The commander was stunned, unable to believe Carlson could get so close to him without him knowing. Isaac used his hand to gently push the axe blade away from his face, casually telling Bessemer that it was up to him whether to believe it or not. His gaze flashed with determination. Isaac affirmed he would show no mercy to anyone who dared to stand in his way of protecting his territory. The giant looked at Isaac with a completely different expression. He realized the blood of great warriors was truly flowing in this young boy. "I am Isaac von Goethe," he proudly announced his name, while his hand decisively pulled the sword from its sheath. Isaac reiterated his identity as the heir to the blood of Adele, the daughter of the famous high chieftain of the warrior tribe. The dual challenge rang out, making Hans, who was standing nearby, break out in a cold sweat for the young master's safety. Isaac coldly asserted what he would do immediately after defeating the giant commander. Drawing his sword from the scabbard, Isaac declared he would be the one to hold supreme command over the entire Windfelt camp. Isaac's sharp sword tip pointed straight at the commander, leaving him completely stunned by the overwhelming aura of the young lord.